What is it like to sail around the world on an aircraft carrier in the U.S. Navy? You're about to find out. The brilliant Cal, the guitar hero, with our Equal Matters intro. He's just back from a nationwide tour, and he's going to join us to tell us all about it real soon on Equal Matters. Stay tuned. Today, my friend Justin Cross. Justin left a career in aerospace engineering to start his own business. It was first Earn Your Booze, now it's Earn It All. Fitness and nutrition programs that get you results fast, results that last. Now, prior to being the CEO of Earn It All, Justin was in the Navy right after high school. After boot camp, he was assigned to a flight team in Japan. So at 19, he moved halfway across the world. Later, he'd roll with that fighter squadron to an aircraft carrier to go on a world tour. Justin's going to give you a firsthand experience of what it's like, not just on the carrier, but on the flight deck where he was assigned. It's the most dangerous job outside of combat in the U.S. military. Today, you'll hear how Justin managed that Top Gun style. Justin Cross, sum up for me what it was like going around the world on a aircraft carrier in the United States Navy for months.
That's a great question. What's up, Rob? So imagine living kind of in a prison that is floating and moving around the world. You're on 7 days a week, 12 hours on, 12 hours off. And on my particular job, I spent a lot of time on the flight deck, which has dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of fighter jets and helicopters and all sorts of stuff that are blowing heavy-duty exhaust, loud noise, sun, and it's moving, uneven surfaces. It's one of the craziest experiences I've ever had. And as far as like situational awareness goes, I don't think I'm ever going to be in a situation where you had to really have your head on a swivel more than that.
So that's why I want to get into this with you, because one night we were hanging out. So Justin Cross is the CEO of Earn It All in the Earn It All Academy. Used to be called Earn Your Booze. So I linked up with you however many years ago because I just loved what you were doing. We were doing workouts and we were drinking after having a party. So we went down to Tucson for an event and we were sharing a room. And you were telling me all of these stories about living on an aircraft carrier. And I had never experienced that.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my goodness, this is a fascinating time to revisit this because it's such a unique experience. So back me up, Justin, if you could, because why did you join the Navy? Because you're a little bit younger than me. So we're talking a post 9/11 world when you are graduating high school and you still decided to join the United States Navy. What was behind that decision?
So I was a junior during 9/11, junior in high school. So, I woke up and I saw it happening on TV and talked to my dad, and we still went to school, but we didn't really do anything that day. We just watched the TV, And as we watched that day unfold, for myself and a lot of guys, we were watching that just like, dude, this is obviously it was so different than anything else we'd ever seen before. But we were at the age, I think, I was at the age where I was like, you know what, I kind of feel like this is going to be, I'm going to have something to do with this, and I wasn't sure what, because I was pissed, Yeah. I was watching this and I was like, doesn't make any sense. I'm a junior in high school. Every other year so far, every other day has just been, typical school stuff. You get up, you worry about, the color shoes you're wearing and your girlfriend and, just whatever. You're just going about your normal life. And as that happened, like, I don't think anybody realized the ramifications of how it would change like the whole country and the whole world. But, even at that age, I was probably 17, I just like this just changed stuff. Like tomorrow, we're not just going to go back to just having a regular day. Like I knew that right away. And so the next thing for me was, was like, what am I going to do after high school? Mm-hmm. I had no interest in college, no interest in doing trade schools or anything like that. We looked at a couple trade schools and I was, I wanted to puke. Like, there's just no way. I was not into school. Like, I just.
Is that what it was? So you knew, like, I have done my 12 years of obligatory schooling. I don't want to do anymore.
Yeah, I had no interest in doing school. Plus, this thing happened on 9/11. I was working at Sam's Club at the time, and my buddy Donnie Swan comes in, and he goes, we talk every day. We were pushing carts, just kids in high school.
Donnie Swan, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
At Sam's Club, and Schwan actually.
Schwan.
And he goes, hey, I'm joining the Navy, and I was like, what? He's like, yeah, I'm joining the Navy, and I was like, oh, no kidding. All right. Interesting. So he's, we're talking about it all day. So I went in and talked to the Air Force recruiters, the Marine recruiters, the Navy recruiters. And the more I talked about it, like everything just started to connect, you know. I was just like, you know what? This is the thing I think that I started to feel last year, you know, when this 9/11 happened. And I didn't want to go to college. I didn't want to, you know, be stuck at home and have my parents, you know, wonder, you know, how come I'm not doing anything with my life. And everything just kind of came together. And I was like, you know what? I'm joining the Navy. And I joined with Donnie, and we actually went on a buddy program to boot camp. So we left the same day, went from here, went to Great Lakes, Michigan, and started our Navy careers at the exact same time.
And you're allowed to do that in the recruiter's office. You could say, hey, my buddy Donnie and I would like to do this together. And like,
yeah.
Perfect. We have this buddy program. See you in Great Lakes.
Yeah, it's just another incentive to like make sure that you like actually join, I think, you know.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so like it doesn't really mean too much. It means like we went to boot camp together, and then that was kind of it. Like we just kind of did that. And then we didn't see each other again for a while until I got onto the aircraft carrier. And then lo and behold, there he was on my aircraft carrier.
My goodness.
So it was pretty cool how that worked out.
That is very cool. So when you're making this decision, your parents in a post 9/11 world, you go to them and say, Mom, Dad, I'm joining the Navy. What was their reaction?
So I don't think they were exactly super fired up about it. Because they also, you know, knew that I was going to like go for it. I was going to do everything that I could, you know. So I was, you know, in boot camp, I was trying to go for a SWCS, Surface Warfare Combatant Crew, which is essentially the team that does some special operations. They're not SEALs, but they help like maybe like deliver SEALs to a certain point or extract them from a zone or whatever. And I wanted to go into that. So from that standpoint, I'm sure my parents were just kind of like, not too thrilled, you know, with all the fighting and the escalation and everything that was going on.
And especially the use of the SEALs, because they're our biggest, baddest. They do the most dangerous stuff.
Yeah, and even like just, you know, any military at that point, you know, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of bombing. There was a lot of, you know, this and that. There was almost a, you know, certain thing I'd be going overseas to the Middle East, you know, no matter what I did in the Navy. But, you know, they're also very proud patriots, you know, freedom-loving American parents. So, like, at the same time, they're also like, you know, my son's in the Navy. Like, it's also like a cool, exciting thing. So
they have a bumper sticker? Do they put, like, proud parent?
Yeah. I think my dad, I believe, had a license plate frame.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I think he had at the time, I believe it was his blue Cadillac, and he had like the blue and gold Navy frame on the license plate, I think.
Nice.
So it was cool. Like they were very supportive of it, you know. They went and took me to drop me off for boot camp and everything, came to boot camp graduation, and they're supportive the entire time. And I think after a while, I just have to imagine, I haven't actually asked him this, I should. I think after a while the nerves probably calmed down, and then it was like, all right, well, this is what he does now.
And I think that, I want to go back to what you said about you had a feeling. Because I've known you now for 6 or 7 years. We've been friends for 6 or 7 years. You've always tended to follow that intuition. So is this, going into the Navy, was this a similar intuition that has led you into entrepreneurial life? Because that's a risky decision.
Yeah.
Given all you were considering when joining the Navy, given the time that it was in a post 9/11 world, it's risky to be an entrepreneur. Was there an element that you look back at now and say, yeah, me, Justin Cross, I kind of like some risk?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, because part of it was the reason, I think a big reason why I didn't want to go to any more schools, because there was no excitement. There was no risk. There was no thrill. There was nothing that kind of made you go like, ooh, I don't know, you know, like it's just like more boring stuff. And so there was definitely that aspect, like, you know, like we were all very, you know, very aware of what could happen by joining the military, especially at a time like that with so much conflict. But I don't know, that was, I was kind of drawn to that, believe it or not, you know, like, you know, I have a lot of family that was in the military prior to me, like, you know, grandfather, you know, was in World War II, didn't go overseas, just wasn't called, but it was in, my wife's, dad, he fought the whole damn World War II, and, you know, like, basically,
and he was a badass.
Basically every day of it,
yeah.
Like hand to hand, like, you know, did some crazy stuff. And I think I was really looking, you know, up to those generations that had that experience in those wars that meant so much to the country and the world, that like at the time I was like, well, this is my calling. This is it. Like, you know, this just happened. We have to respond. I'm the perfect age. I don't want to go to college. I'm going to go do this. And it's a little risky, and it was kind of fun. It was kind of exciting. And I was like, I'm going for it.
When you went for it, you go to boot camp. It is near Great Lakes, right? The Chicago area?
It was in Great Lakes, Michigan. I don't know if it's still there anymore, but yes.
Okay. What was it like? So you first time you leave home.
Yeah.
First time I left home was I was 19, sophomore. I go to the college dorm. I went Boston, 20 miles away from my house. So I didn't go far.
Sure.
So you go from Phoenix, Arizona to Great Lakes, and now you're on your own. What was going through your mind when you showed up at boot camp?
Well, yeah, I mean, on purpose, when you show up at boot camp, they don't really want you to know what's going on. Because like as soon as you show up, you're standing on like, yellow duct tape on the ground. Everyone's yelling at you. It seems like everybody there hates you, even though they have no idea who you are. They shave your head. They basically strip you of your identity. They shave your head. They take all your clothes. They give you some other, clothes that everybody else has. And they're really, making you into a number, whatever the, military needs. So when you get there, it's kind of confusing, but it's also kind of exciting. And it's, you have to trust what's going on, but at the same time, you're just like, dude, what? You don't know what's going on. You're getting injected with everything possible, going through the vaccination line and, and again, you see other people that are freaking out and scared. So like, I was like cool with it, but there were some people that were, some dudes they were breaking down. Some guys were crying, and that I saw, if you broke down and saw that you had an issue or you talked back, that brought all sorts of attention you didn't want on you. So I was like, I figured that out pretty quick. I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to say shit. I'm just going to do whatever they tell me to do. I'm going to get past this, get through this, because I imagine the whole Navy is not going to be like this. And so that's kind of the name of boot camp was, do what you need to do, but don't stand out in a bad way, because that does not lead to a good experience.
Do you find it easy to make friends in situations like that? So in your boot camp, there's a bunch of new people you've never met other than your buddy who's there with you. Did you guys get to interact, you and Donnie, this time while you're at boot camp? And did you have other people that you were like, all right, these are my people?
Yeah, it was mostly like right off the bat, we were just thrown into a sea of other people. But yeah, I love meeting new people. So like, I was sitting next to some guys that were from they were from like the deep south of Mississippi, I think. And, they knew the Nappy Roots rapping group and like all this, and like completely different from where I came from. And I thought that was a lot of fun, because right away you're experiencing these cultures from around the country, firsthand, of people that have come from all different walks of life and all different backgrounds and everything. So, for me, like it was cool. I made a lot of friends in boot camp. I liked it.
What did you learn in boot camp? What did they put you through, the United States Navy?
Man, all sorts of stuff. I got really good at folding clothes.
Is it like they show you in the movies where every crisp line has to be perfect?
Yes, and there's a reason for it. They definitely go to the extreme. But, on a boat, like I was on a huge boat, the aircraft carrier, it's about 1,000 feet long. You only have so much space for your stuff. Right? There's other ships, like especially on submarines and these other smaller boats, where you have a very small little locker for your stuff, so that you have to be very organized with your clothes, with books, shoes, like, little, personal items that you have to be organized, or it doesn't work. It's not going to fit. People are going to hate you. You're making a mess and everything. So in boot camp, got really good at folding clothes, really good at making my bed, really good at ironing.
I mean, in the military, those are your skills, but they're not skills you necessarily think that you need to perfect unless you're in the military.
Yeah, unless you're in the military. Yeah. And all that. And also you start to get used to, having other people tell you what to do. Which a lot of guys, especially like 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, they're not into that. And so you realize...
I'm still not into that.
Yeah, you're still not into it. I'm definitely not into it anymore. But it's a good skill, I think, when you're young to realize, oh, hey, there's different levels to life and to leadership and all of that. So they do a good job of like kind of like showing you that you are a number when you come in. But then as you progress and as you learn and prove your value and, and earn your ranks and stuff, then you can become, one of the leaders.
So my dad was also in the Navy in the late 60s, so in the Vietnam era. And he joined the Navy, and he goes to boot camp, and then they give him a test. And you mentioned this to me, too, that they give you an assessment test to see what skills you're good at, what comes naturally to you, what you picked up in regular school.
Yeah.
So when you took your test, what popped for you? My dad's he had two things. Sonar, he was really good at, and then airplane, engine mechanics.
Sure.
What did you test well in?
So even though I didn't like school, I did decent on the ASVAB.
ASVAB?
Yeah, it's called the ASVAB. I think it's, let's see if I can get it.
It's many years ago at this point.
Aptitude Standardized something, whatever, test, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, it's basically to see what you know just about anything. So luckily for me, it wasn't just like, hey, what did you learn in school? There's a lot of questions about, name this tool, or like, what are these tools used for? Like, what makes this engine run, like this? So there was some like mechanic type stuff. There was some like some technology. Like at the time, computers were pretty new, but my dad and I had spent a couple years kind of building our own computers. Because remember back in the day, you could like go to not Best Buy, Fry's, and all these places. You can get, you could upgrade your own memory and your big, desktop computer and all that.
The side off and put new things in.
So we had been doing that. And thankfully I had, both of my parents, they were both school teachers, and I was really close with my grandparents, so I had learned a decent amount about history and all this kind of stuff. So I did well on the ASVAB overall. So they wanted me to either be a nuke engineer or avionics.
Wow.
So I ended up choosing avionics, but I'll tell you why. Because like nuke, they wanted a longer commitment. I think it was only a 1 year, maybe like minimum 5 or 6 year commitment, because there's a lot more school. But then if you do go down that path of being a nuke, you're just about guaranteed you're going to be in a submarine.
Ooh, yeah. Because they're powered by nuclear reactors.
Yeah, because that's where they need most of the nuclear technicians. It's either there, or maybe you can get into like some like silos in the middle of Kansas or something like that. But I didn't want to do a submarine, so I was like, avionics, cool. Airplanes, it's still high technology. Like that sounds more like my style. I want to do that. I like the sun. Let's do that one.
It's very interesting because I mentioned my dad. I mean, he said he tested well for the sonar, but he said the same thing. He's like, the submarine life just didn't appeal to him. So he went into the airplane side of things as well. So when do you make that decision? Do you make that decision in boot camp, towards the end of it? And then do you get to pick your assignment? Do you give like a top 5 list?
I'm trying to remember that now. I believe I went in into boot camp already knowing I was going to do avionics. So that was done. That was chosen beforehand.
So before you actually do boot camp, you do your test.
Yeah.
You get to determine the path that you're going to go.
Correct. Yeah, because when you go into the recruiter's office, like this is back in high school, right? You do your ASVAB. They see where you score on that, and they say, hey, these are the things you qualify, and based on the needs of the Navy at the time, here's what we have available. That's when we had the talk about nuke or avionics. So I chose avionics. So then you go to boot camp. You don't know where you're going to go after boot camp, though. So you just know that you are an airman. Like I was in the air wing. I knew I was going to airplanes, but I didn't know if it was going to be fighter jets or refueling planes or helicopters or anything. It could have been, who knows what it could have been, right? So basically after boot camp, towards the end, that's when it starts to come in. Okay, hey, Cross, you're going here. Hunter, you're going there. And they start to name off where everyone's going. And it gets really exciting. Actually, that was in... I think that actually happened when I was in A school.
A school is what?
Yeah, so, okay, we're getting my brain firing up.
No, we're going way back in the memory banks.
So after boot camp, like I said, I was in the air wing, right? It's going to be avionics. So I had to go to A school, which is basically your next school, your first school after boot camp, okay? So if you have a job that doesn't require a specialized school, you might just go right to your unit. Like if you're like if you're a mechanic or you're a grunt, if you're just going to go kick in doors because you're in the Army, something like that, you probably go to weapons school and then you go to the field. For me, I had to go to Pensacola, Florida, and I did about 6 months of training now to be an avionics technician. So that's where they taught us about, wiring. They taught us about how to work on radios, about how radar theory works, like all this different stuff that we needed to know to do our jobs. And towards the end of that is when they would be like, all right, cool. Based on how you scored and the needs of the Navy at the time, okay, Cross, you are going to Atsugi, Japan. You're going to be with VF-154, the Black Knights. It was an F-14 fighter squadron. Ooh. You're going to go work as an avionics technician with VF-154 in Japan, and you leave in, whatever it was, 2 weeks or something like that.
All right, I want to get back to Japan here in just a second. I want to go back to boot camp. Is there lessons of discipline that you learned in the Navy that you still apply today as you run the Earn It All Academy and Earn It All?
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of them would be...
We'll get you back to Justin Cross, my friend, in just a moment. But your voice is your main instrument. You use it every single day in every single relationship. Question is, are you in tune Well, how to tell? If you're out of tune, your ideas are not getting buy-in, people aren't listening to you, and relationships are stale. Hi, I'm Rob Hunter. I'm a performance and communications coach. I know what it's like when the pressure's on. I know how to step up and perform. I know how to prepare so that I'm ready to perform at any given moment whenever that opportunity arrives. I want to teach you those skills as your coach, to give you all of the tools a professional broadcaster uses to master the art of performance, because that's when it matters. That's when you stand out. Communication skills and techniques are exactly what your business is looking for, because it's the great communicators who are the great leaders. It's the great communicators who resolve disputes. It's the great communicators that move their team towards a vision. Set up a free 20-minute consultation call with me at paintedporchstrategies.com/Rob, or check the show notes. Once again, set up that free 20-minute phone call with me about how you can use communication skills to elevate your performance. paintedporchstrategies.com/Rob, or check the show notes. Now back to Justin Cross on Equal Matters.
Is there lessons of discipline that you learned in the Navy that you still apply today as you run the Earn It All Academy and Earn It All?
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of them would be being a good listener. I think, because a lot of people might think of the Navy or the military and just think, oh, it's very alpha, it's very outgoing. There's a lot of yelling. There's a lot of, decision making and stuff. And that is true. But I think when I was young, when I got into boot camp, I realized, all right, I need to sit back and listen and see what I can learn, right? Learn from all these different things. I want to hear what the drill instructors are actually saying. I want to see what happens when that guy acts like a jackass. You know what I mean? Like, I want to see, like, I can see this guy struggling with something. I'm going to watch and see what happens with him. So I started to kind of learn that, and I use some of that today because, we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that we have inside of Earn It All Academy, and it's very important to listen to them to really figure out what their problems and what their goals are so we can help them properly. So a lot of people, especially in the coaching space, they don't listen enough. They think they know what the person is asking them, and they start to give the solution before they truly understand what the person is asking. So that's something I always apply to what we do now with our people. So if someone is, struggling, for example, with a way that they're eating, maybe with their nutrition, I want to hear them all out. And so we have our guys ask a lot of questions and really try to get to the root of what they're saying so we can actually help them the right way.
And that's fascinating because that's a communication lesson. And, you and I, Justin, have talked many times about how important communication is. I'm a communications coach because communication is performance. And when it's crunch time, what you say matters. I think about Dr. Martin Luther King when he delivered the I Have a Dream speech. That was not a speech that was written down. It just channeled through him, and he delivered it, and it got the nation to sort of wake up. That's the power of that you're able to use from the Navy to still apply to entrepreneurial life, which is absolutely fantastic. So, boot camp, Pensacola, Florida, wiring airplanes. First time you're at an F-14, I assume, since you went to the F-14s in Japan, which you mentioned, you're learning how to wire this badass American aircraft that has been featured in movies. It's been featured in documentaries. And you're there as, a 19-year-old kid fitting into those small spaces, taking wiring out and putting new wiring in?
Pretty much, yeah. I actually graduated boot camp on my 19th birthday, and then shipped out to Florida and then went to Japan. And it was pretty surreal getting to Japan. Like, just that alone was a blast, right? We get picked up by someone from the squadron in a van, and we're driving through, and you just imagine, you're 19 and you're, oh shit, I just moved to Japan. Like, this is wild, like a year ago, like I was worried I was going to have to go to like ATT or, ITT Tech or something.
Yeah.
And now here I am with a uniform and I'm living in Japan. This is amazing, right? And so we get to the hangar, and the jets aren't there because the squadron was already out to sea at the time on the Kitty Hawk, which is a conventional powered aircraft carrier, not nuke. It ran on like diesel fuel, I guess.
Those must be a long fill up when you pull into the port.
Yeah.
All right, we need 8,000 gallons of diesel.
Yeah, just wild, right?
Yep.
So they were already out there. So we just waited, I think it's about a week or so till they got back. And then when they came back, it was one of those things like, you're watching them come in. And one thing I'll never forget about the F-14 was the sound of those engines. They have a really unique, high-pitched kind of scream to them, kind of like a whine. And it was just amazing because it was accurate watching Top Gun. The sound is the same. So I remember when I first saw them, I was like, this is just the freaking coolest thing ever. You know what I mean? I'm like, they're huge. They're way bigger than I thought. They don't really look like they could fly, but I see them landing. Like it's amazing. And yeah, like you said, one of my first jobs was wiring. So I was talking with the guy who was in charge of the shop when they came back. And right away, he said something like, he's like, you know what? He's like, you, Ruiz, this other guy, he's like, you guys don't seem like dumbasses. He's like, I think I'm going to keep you guys. Because he had the option, cause I guess we had like a good amount of guys that they sent over. He had the option to send some guys away to go work on, to be mechanics or to go clean some stuff or to go work on the generators or whatever. But he kept me and he kept some other guys. And right away we started wiring jets. And before you know it, we were up in the cockpit, sitting in the seat, replacing wires. And that alone was another crazy thing. Because check this out. I don't know if you ever thought about this. When you get into the cockpit of a fighter jet, what do you get into? What are you sitting on? An ejection seat. So you have to go through all the training on that, how to verify that it's safe, make sure the pins are in, make sure the handle's in a certain position, make sure this and that, make sure this isn't, indication isn't wrong over here. And the first couple times you get in, you're sweating because you're like, if I did this thing freaking wrong, like in the back of your mind, you're like, if I mess this thing up, I'm dead. Like I'm going to get ejected into the ceiling of the hangar. I'm going to be splattered everywhere. So the first couple times you're just like, you're just really making sure you're doing it right. And you're in there. So a lot of the wiring we had to replace was in the cockpit. So I spent a lot of time, like you said, in kind of a weird position. Imagine
you're a tall guy. You're 6'2", 6'3".
Yeah. So imagine sitting in your chair and having to replace wiring like down by kind of where your shoe is on one side and for like 6 hours. Yeah.
My back.
Yeah. So
you disability for this?
Yeah. You have your tools. You're bent over in this weird way, and you're doing this and that. But at the same time, like it was really, really cool. And I got good at wiring. And that was kind of like my knack for a while. They're like, oh, you're a wiring guy. And that was neat because it, kept me in the shop and like I had like something I was getting praised for, but at the same time I was like, I want to do more, you know what I mean? But it was a good foot in the door to show that I could be coachable and I was able to put out a good product. And that really just led to me being able to, do more and more and get on more assignments.
It's very intricate work though, replacing wires, isn't it? So
yeah.
How much patience do you have to have, not only to be bent over in that really funky position, but to be able to do those tedious tasks of those tiny little wires.
Right.
What did you cut some and put some new wires in? Like, does it drive you crazy or do you just get into the zone and you just do it?
It's one of those things where it can actually be pretty satisfying as long as you like know what to do. And if you have kind of like a knack for it, because you have to like cut the wire, you have to strip the insulation off, right? The outer layer. And then inside there's typically some twisted wires. Like it's not just one solid wire. There's like maybe 10 to 16 to 24, however many wires that are twisted in there. And you have to usually get those wires into a splice, something that is going to connect to another piece of wire. And this is where it gets tedious. If some of those little wires, if you can imagine having pick up like a handful of like dry spaghetti noodles, so you got like 30 noodles in your hand, right? Well, if you're going to go put those into like a PVC pipe and some of them like don't make it in, they stick off the side, they come up like a wild hair on your mustache or they break off or something, like that's the kind of stuff you had to like really watch for. So they're very small. So you have to twist them, make sure they get into the splice just right. And then you have to do the splice the right way. Then you have QA, who's an older guy who knows what he's doing. He comes over and he makes sure it's done right way. So yeah, if you mess up, you have to do a repair all over again. But once you get it, you really start to like find a craft and then you can get kind of like intricate with it and kind of, just do all these little tricky things to make it look real nice. And then afterwards, that's when people are like, oh, this guy really cares about what he's doing. All right, cool. I think let's make him like a final checker on the flight deck too, because he's shown that he can have a high level of of attention on something like this.
So like in life, in entrepreneur life, Justin, the little things you do. In fact, I just think you posted a video the other day on your Instagram about doing those little things.
Yeah.
So doing those little things, making sure the wires all fit inside the insulation so it all fits together. That lets you learn those skills. It also gets you noticed. It also gets you, oh, okay, we can trust Cross to get on the flight deck, which we're going to get to here in just a moment, because that in and of itself, working on the flight deck, crazy things going on there. So you're 19 years old, you're rewiring F-14s, you are learning these skills. So what are the opportunities that were given to you because you were good at that and you paid attention to details?
Yeah, great question. So that kind of led into me becoming what we call a final checker on the flight deck. So we only had 6 months or so with the F-14s. We didn't know this when we got the orders. So this is another thing about the military. You don't always know the full picture of stuff, right? So they go, hey, cool, Cross, you're moving to Japan. You're going to go be stationed in Japan to work with the, F-14 jets over there in Atsugi. And I was like, sweet, I'll take that. I'll go live in Japan for a couple of years.
By the way, Atsugi, my dad lived there for 2 years too.
Oh, cool, yeah.
That's kind of a weird thing.
That's cool, yeah. I was like, maybe, I don't know if it'll be my entire, 4 years, but, probably going to be a year or two, maybe 3 years. Like, I'm excited. I'm going to go live in Japan for a while. Well, as soon as that van picked us up, that's when they notified us, oh, yeah, we're moving to California.
Oh.
I was like, what are you talking about? We just got to Japan.
Got used to this place.
Yeah, what are you talking about? Like, this is literally on the ride from the airport, right? And they're like, oh, yeah, well, the F-14s were some of the oldest jets in the Navy at the time, and they were phasing them out and getting the new F-18 Super Hornets.
Ooh.
So those were in California.
Got it.
So essentially, when we did that, we can talk about that transition if you want. Once we got rid of the F-14s, what we had to do there, we had to clean them up. We painted them. We got them operating perfectly because the guys, the chiefs, the older guys in the F-14 squadron were pissed that we were getting rid of them. Because it was such a classic jet. The Top Gun, Tom Cruise jet.
Like
just
American air power at its finest.
Yeah, it was one of like the coolest, most iconic American fighter jets ever, right? And so they were upset we were getting rid of them. So their middle finger back to the Navy, essentially, was to hand over all of our, I think we had maybe 12 or 13 planes, hand them all over in perfect condition. So we worked our butts off getting everything working perfectly. The wiring, the radio, the radars, the paint. Like, we even went through and meticulously painted inside the cockpit and basically handed over museum pieces. Be like, all right, cool, go ahead and mothball them. And I think they took them down to Tucson and just put them at Davis Moth and and just got rid of them. So then we went to F-18s. And that really led me into, like you said, what did the wiring lead to? I became a team leader for, it's called a weapons check, WIT, I think, team. And it was, or IWT, integrated weapons team. So basically,
it's all coming back to you now, brother.
It's been a couple of years. So basically, I became a team leader, and then I was also able to do what I really loved about my job, which is work on the flight deck.
Which I can't wait to get to, but you're going to have to sit tight for that, because I want to back up to being a 19-year-old living in Japan, a foreign country. Japan I've been to, fascinating country. It is similar to the United States in some ways, but not so much in others. It's very clean. People generally are very polite. There's not a lot of crime. So what was it like being 19, being able to go off base in Atsugi, Japan, to be able to travel around Japan as a 19-year-old?
It was amazing. It was really cool, being young like that, but also being, 6'2" from America.
That's another thing of difference, right?
Yeah. Like, you stand out like a sore thumb, and the Japanese people are so kind. They're so nice, and they, for the most part, love Americans. We're there on the island protecting them, and like everything that happened in World War II. Like, I'm sure there's some people that still don't like America for that, but for the most part, from what we experienced, everyone was very welcoming and very grateful to have us there. So it was great to be out there experiencing that, because people were like literally wanted to practice their English with us, or they wanted to try to help us find something. So it was great, and we got to go and do all, go to parties. We got to go get lost. And it was just a blast. And we got out as much as we could.
What did you do when you got out? Did you go to bars, nightclubs, sightseeing? Do you interact with people like you mentioned? One of the great things was I was so nervous about talking to this guy. We were lost when we were in, I don't know, looking at the subway. Yeah. And this guy, he's a security guard or whatever. And I'm like, Amy's like, just go ask him. And I'm like, oh, what if he doesn't speak English? So I go up and I hold my phone and I'm like looking for this in English. And he goes, oh, yeah, just go this way, that way, this way. And I'm like, oh, okay. I built up this whole story because I was a foreign country. I was a foreigner. And all of that was just a story because he had the information. And even had he not spoken English, there was enough information on my phone where he could have pointed to it and helped me out. But I thought that was such a great example of interactions in Japan. Another example is I was doing laundry because you only bring so many clothes. You're trying to pack as many. So I'm looking at the signs and I'm using Google Translate. And he comes over and he helps me, speaks English, tells me where to go eat in Osaka. And I was like, this is pretty cool. Was the experience for you? And you were there for how long in Japan?
6 months.
Was that a similar experience throughout the 6 months?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we hit a lot of bars, a lot of nightclubs, a lot of restaurants.
19-year-old sailor.
Yeah, totally. And like the legal drinking age was 20, so I was not able to drink legally. But when you're a 6'2" sailor, like I was never carded ever. Never at Circle K, never at a bar, never at a club, anything. So like you just kind of get to do what you want. But the people were so nice. We'd love to get lost. Like me and some of my buddies, we would just go to different spots. We'd go to Tokyo, we'd go to Roppongi, we'd go to places I don't even remember, and we would just get off and just walk around. We would just go, look for food, walk through shopping malls, walk through stores, go just find different areas of Japan, and we just see what happens. It was a blast. And there was one time we even got super, super lost. Like we went way too far on one of the train lines. Because around the base, there's a good amount of English on the subway systems, right? Like it's a lot of English. And then as you get farther and farther away, they'll start to, chop that down a little bit. So there's a little bit of English here and there. You can make it out. If you get too far, there's none, because now you're really far removed from the base, right? So we got out there so far one time that we were legitimately lost. Like there was no English letters anywhere. And so we did what you just said. And talked to this one guy, and we said, hey, we had this little card in our wallet that said, hey, I'm an American sailor. I am lost. Can you please help me find, I think it was Naval Air Facility at Sugi, Japan. And I don't remember if he read that or if I knew enough Japanese at the time, because I picked up a good amount. But long story short, he said, yes, he took us onto another train and traveled with us. I think it was about 2 hours away from the direction he was going, until we got to a spot where I recognized English and we knew, okay, we can for sure get home from here. And then we went, and he just did that, didn't want money, didn't want anything. He was just happy to help. And I imagine that took him out of his way. He's probably like 4 or 5 hours late getting home.
I don't know that I would do that. I'd look to help people out, but 4 or 5 hours.
Are you kidding me?
Exactly.
Yeah. And he was, in a suit, had a briefcase, he wasn't like just some guy that didn't have anything to do. I'm sure he probably had, a family to get home to and is going to work again the next day. And, but he couldn't pass up the opportunity to help somebody. It was great.
So you're there 6 months. You're hanging out in Japan. You've now joined the Navy. You're now in the Navy. What did you dawn on you how cool of an experience that you were having by the age of 19?
Yeah. Yeah, it really did. Because like in one sense, I was getting the college experience that I wasn't getting, right? Because in Japan, we, for the most part, lived in kind of like dorms, so it was like big hotel essentially. So I had 2 roommates in my room, and we always knew which rooms were the party rooms, which ones were, nobody ever went to. It was kind of like that, right? They had beer in the vending machines. There was a there was a pool, there was a gym, there was like our own little place to eat. Like it was really, really cool. And then there was a club, like on base where you could go and you could, just have beers. And they would have I think one time Godsmack came in and played.
Wow.
Yeah, so they would bring people in, stuff like that. So that was kind of a blast. We got to do that. But it was also just really fun, like, driving like little weird cars, and just everything about the culture was so different and so cool that I just loved it. I would have stayed for a long time.
What did it mean to you, looking back at it now, to have had an experience living in a foreign country for that long? Like, what has that taught you? What are some of the lessons that you still carry with you?
Yeah, it's massive, because you realize, no matter how you're raised, you're in a bubble. There are so many different bubbles in the world, and really the only way to experience them is to go there. And I think go there and be there for a good amount of time, like even just a couple days. Like, we traveled to Dubai and Greece and Bahrain and Guam and all these different places, and you got to experience it a bit. But living in a country for a couple months really shows you how different the world is, and how many people are out there that probably never think about the stuff you do. They never think about America. They never worry about your politics. They don't watch the shows that you watch. They don't watch the sports you watch. You can have, it's essentially kind of like a different planet. It's such a completely different experience that it really opened my eyes to like, all right, like maybe everything that I think is not, the best way, because there's people all across the planet that are doing things completely different, and they're living their lives. They're doing their things. And I think especially at a young age, it really showed that like, all right, cool. Being in more, understanding to different people and like, just being open-minded to more ideas. It really did that, because you just see how many other ideas there are out there and how many different ways there are of living and doing, going. All the stores look different, like everything.
I love that, because the older I get, Justin, at 45, I realize this. I have a certain way that I live my life. Justin Cross, you have a certain way that you live your life.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of America, is that I get to decide for the most part how I want to live. There's obviously basic rules, like I can't walk up and punch you in the face, which would be a horrible idea because you would throw me across the planet and I would probably land in Atsuki, Japan. But that's the rules, right? So I'm free to choose my life. You're free to choose yours. And there's a beauty in that where I don't have to restrict you, Justin, because you do something different than me. Right. And I don't have to judge you because you might do something different than me.
Right.
Because that's just life, and that's what's beautiful and amazing about it.
And I think that's part of the reason why I understand, like I believe Jake Paul lives in Puerto Rico. And a lot of people give him shit for that. And they're like, oh, how come you're not in America and this and that? Like, well, you don't have to live like anybody else.
Exactly.
Like, you could be, like, we're all on the same rock. We're all on the same planet. Like, if you figure out how to make money with fame or, like, a digital product or something like that, and you want to live on an island and not vote here or do anything here, like, what's wrong with that?
Exactly.
You can do whatever you want to do with your life.
Exactly.
And I think that's part of living in Japan helped me, just understand that, like, what I do right now, I own a house in downtown Phoenix. We have an office in Fountain Hills. Like, all this stuff that I do, I could completely change that next year or in 5 years and own nothing and live somewhere on the other side of the planet. And that's perfectly cool too.
And it's an experience.
Yeah.
Because ultimately that's what this is. And we're talking about your experience through the Navy and living in Japan. So now you're 6 months into Japan, you're partying, you're having a great time, you're building friendships, and then they tell you you're going to California. What goes through your head as you have this amazing opportunity in Japan that's coming to an end?
Yeah, it was kind of a bummer, right? Because, we loved Japan. Everybody did. Even us new guys who were only there for a little bit, you saw how much the guys that had lived there for a long time loved it.
Yeah.
And you just wanted that experience too. Because if you lived there for a while and you got to a certain rank, you could go live out in town. You could get your own house. And it was like, there was so many levels to it. And, we tried to hike Mount Fuji a couple times and it got rained out. So I never got to do it. So there's so much more I wanted to do. So when they told us we're going to California, like, at first I was like, oh, cool. San Diego was on my list, Well, we weren't going to San Diego, though.
Uh-oh.
We went to Lemoore, California, which is about, I think, maybe an hour south of Fresno, kind of middle of nowhere, cow fields, cotton fields, stuff like that. So
the California, they don't advertise on the Come to California brochures.
That's right. The California they like to pretend doesn't exist.
Yeah, right.
So we weren't pumped, to say the least, because we wanted to stay.
And you guys are a unit, so it's the same guys that you work with that you're going to stick with for a while.
Correct. So the entire squadron was VF 154, and the entire squadron moved to California and became VFA 154. So we are still the Black Knights. We still had the 2 blood stripes on the tail, but we upgraded our planes and added the A because now that plane could do attack. So it went from a fighter squadron to a fighter attack squadron.
What's the difference?
Technically, like the capabilities of the plane.
Got it.
So like the F-14 was mostly like an air-to-air, fighter with missiles and stuff like that.
Dogfights.
Yeah, stuff like that. The F-18 was designed to where it could do that and had a lot more capabilities to attack the ground. Smart bombs and stuff like that.
As technology develops.
Yeah. So like the F-14 could like pickle a bomb off and it could do some of that, but it wasn't designed for that. These were designed to be a fighter and an attack vehicle. So that's how that happened. So yeah, so when we came back, we actually left Japan. I remember I graduated boot camp on my 19th birthday. Well, we left Japan on my 20th birthday.
At legal drinking age, as you mentioned in Japan.
Yeah. So now, after being in 6 months and going to all the bars and clubs and, illegally, technically, on the day we left, in uniform, I went to the vending machine and bought me and my buddy some beers. And I was like, all right, cool, here we go. I think, I forget, it might have been, it might have been Tiger or Asahi. I forget which one, something. Bought everybody a beer. And then we got on the plane and we landed, and I had to wait another year to buy a beer again. Like, it's just the funniest thing. For one day, I could legally buy a beer, and as soon as we get off the plane, nope, wait another year.
Yep. Welcome back to America.
Yeah.
Here you are in the middle of California working on these new fancy F-18s, but you can't buy beer.
Yeah, but you could, a couple days ago when you were in Japan.
Yeah, exactly.
That was cool. But not anymore. Yeah.
So what's the difference? Atsugi, Japan, what's the name of the town in California?
Lemoore. Lemoore.
What's the difference between Japan and being stationed there and being stationed in Lemoore? Is it just desolate and boring?
It couldn't be a bigger contrast, to be honest. So like Japan, like Atsugi, Japan, and especially when we got into the cities in Tokyo, but even like just the surrounding area in Atsugi, it's very condensed. There's a lot of houses, a lot of businesses, a lot of people on top of each other. But like you said, it's clean and it's organized for the most part, and it's fun, and all that. And you get to Lemoore, and there's nothing, like nothing. Like there's miles and miles and miles of cotton fields, mostly cotton. There's cow fields, and then there's like a couple subdivisions, kind of like here and there. So the base in Lemoore was stationed there because it was all for fighter jets. It was landlocked. There's no ocean or anything, and they put them out there, one, to keep the sound away. And, for safety, like if a plane crashed or had to do an emergency landing, it's not over a heavily populated area. So they stick the squadrons a lot of times out kind of in the middle of nowhere. So it was a huge contrast. So we were like, great. We went from, living in the dorms in Japan, loving our lives. You could buy beer out of the vending machines and, awesome culture, really fun, to like nothing going on in the middle of nowhere in California. Lots of rules, and it wasn't the greatest thing.
What does it do to your mind to have to make that transition? Again, these are orders, so you can't get out of them.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, I think we realized how good we had it in Japan,
So it made you appreciate.
Yeah, and then we realized, like, you know what, this is probably more like what most people in the military experience, because most bases are kind of remote. Most of them are not, like, right in downtown San Diego or something.
Yeah.
Like, Miramar's not bad, but, like, so we realized, all right, whatever, this is our life now, So, and it was still kind of fun because now we had new jets to learn. We had new missions. We had new hangars. We had new everything. Security clearances got upgraded, and we started to get more into like crypto technology, which is encrypting, the communications differently. And it started to get more high tech, which is, that kind of led into what I did after the Navy. So it was still cool, it was still exciting. And then we were closer to home, so I bought a truck. Then I could drive home every once in a while, go see my, parents and brother and sister and friends and stuff like that. So there was pros and cons to it. At the time, we would have chosen to stay in Japan, but, it is what it is.
So F-18s, are you coming to California? Are you wiring F-18s? Or since they're newer, is it different things that you're learning and working on these jets?
Yeah, so the F-18, being brand new and being such a solid jet, it was made by Boeing. We did not have to do much wiring. What we were doing there was basically, if something broke, we were changing out, we called it boxes. So you know what a cannon plug is?
No.
So a cannon plug is like, imagine the connector on like anything, on your computer or something. Well, all the connectors on a jet, they have a circular plug that plugs into something, and then you have to turn it to crank it on. Because imagine all the vibration, the back and forth, the
G-forces.
up and down, the G-forces, all that. If you just have a regular plug, like that ain't going to work. So you have to lock it down. So they have things called cannon plugs. So the wires run through these big harnesses with a cannon plug poking out on the end. They usually didn't break. Like there wasn't much going on because they were like, almost like kind of glued into the plane. They were ran, professionally by the Boeing team, at the factory. So when something would break, we were mostly changing out like a radar transmitter or, a radio receiver, like boxes essentially. But then this is when we really got into weapons checks. So one of the things that we always had to be ready for, and this is a lot of what I did on the boat, was you never know what is going to happen as far as like the mission the next day, how much fighting is going to be involved, right? Like what's going on, what the mission is. So you're constantly checking all the different spots on the plane, like under the wing and under the belly. We call them stations, to make sure that each station can accept whatever weapon we need to hang on it that night or the next day.
Is that based on weight, munition?
No, it's actually what we were checking was to make sure that the wiring and the electronic systems, the control system, were functional from end to end. So we called them end-to-end checks. So we knew that if we hung up a 2,000-pound, JDAM bomb, we knew that the moment that the pilot hit the release button, that electrical signal would go down and it would launch the bomb.
Yeah,
it would drop
sure
it. Yeah,
the pilot's not high and dry. Like this one can't launch it.
I can't get it. It's not working.
Yeah.
So we would check and make sure that it was ready to fire missiles, ready to drop bombs. We would check the flare, the chaff and flare. If he had a missile coming after him, he could punch chaff and flare out the back to try to get away from it, like we saw in the new Top Gun movie. So we were testing all that kind of stuff. So it definitely changed. Because the technology changed drastically by going to that plane.
So now you're upgrading your knowledge on a new plane. Are these active war planes? Because, again, this is still war on terror. This is still the somewhat beginning stages of it. And I'm imagining, so what was it, 2002 when you joined?
Yes.
So 2002. So now you're about a year in, so 2003. So we're definitely in Afghanistan, probably getting closer to starting in Iraq. Yep. So are these jets that you're working on at the time, are they war ready? Is this getting them ready for combat missions?
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, these are operational planes that the reason we were flying them was, one, to train the pilots to get ready for combat, and for two, for us to get used to maintaining it, repairing it, cleaning it, turning it around, which means like after a mission when it lands, inspecting it, refueling it, changing the tires if needed, inspecting the engines, making sure it's ready to go. You have to get really good as a team at, we call it turning the plane.
Like NASCAR, like you're the pit crew.
100%. It's like a pit crew. Yeah, so we were practicing that over and over and over and over and over again, because when you do it for real, you're on a ship with limited resources, and it's a totally different game. You know what I mean? You can't just go into the shop and say, "Oh, it's broke, call a part. All right, cool, it'll be here in 5 days." Like you have to bring enough stuff with you, so you have to be really proficient at how to, keep these planes moving.
Okay, it's starting to make sense. I'm starting to get the picture of how, so you go, you learn the wiring, you learn the old school, you come to the new school, so you got this base of knowledge. Now we're going to update your knowledge to the new technology, the new planes, and now we're getting you ready for war.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no other way to put it, right?
Correct. One
of those main elements of war in the United States is the big-ass ship, the aircraft carrier. You mentioned it's 1,000 feet long.
Yeah.
When you got the call, it's go time, what are you thinking?
That's when we got excited again, right? Because in Japan, I missed going on that ship in Japan because they were already out to sea when I got there. So then we got to California. Oh, and then we had to go to more school because now this is a new plane, right? So once that school was done.
So forget that no college thing. You got definitely college education.
Yeah. So, yeah. And then I ended up going through my master's degree afterwards. We can get into that later if you want. So I went to school. They got me. I just didn't want to do it afterwards. But yeah,
you did it in your way, not the way that America wants you to do it necessarily. Like, I'm going to figure this out.
Right. So when it was finally time, they're like, "Hey, we're doing this. We're going to be going on this cruise." We had to go do what's called a workup.
You call it a cruise, like we're going to the Bahamas.
Yeah. Same word, totally different experience. Completely different experience than if you go on Carnival or the Disney line or something like that.
Yeah, I can imagine. I don't think the drinks probably flow like wine like they do in the Carnival
Definitely
lines.
Not. Yeah. Definitely not. So we naturally got really excited for that because, again, back to what you asked before, like we knew there was a high, there's a much higher, risk involved with it. But it's like, all right, cool. This is what we've been waiting for. This is what we're training for. This is the purpose. This is the reason we've been doing all this stuff. So, all right, cool. Let's go. So we originally went out for, I believe it was about a month first to basically go practice
on the aircraft carrier.
Yeah, on an aircraft carrier.
So now you update your training from ground level training, so you've got the base
Yep.
and how to do all the stuff with the plane to make sure it's optimal. Now let's try it out in the water.
Exactly. So we went out essentially for a month just to train, just to practice. So the pilots needed the training of taking off and landing on the carrier. That's a whole other freaking thing, right? That's why they say the Navy pilots are the best, in the military, because Air Force, you get a mile-long runway and you just kind of
Is that a little trash talk between the Air Force and the Navy right there?
Yeah, for sure. I don't think anyone would would go against that. Because like a Navy pilot essentially has to crash every time it's like a controlled crash landing.
Well, there's a lot of trust too, because you have that limited window and you have those cables that you have to land on.
Right. Yeah. So now the whole squadron has to get used to operating in a very limited space on the ship. So it's called like a workup, so we have to, like, there's guys that are in charge of logistics. How many parts for all the different, pieces of the plane do we need to bring out? All right, cool. Let's get that ordered and get that going. The pilots have to practice landing and taking off on the aircraft carrier. We have to practice maintaining it and doing all of our stuff. And so we go out for, I think it was about a month, and we practiced all that to get ready. And that really got us ready then for the full world cruise that we did a little bit after that.
Okay, so let's go there. So actually, let's back up and do a little bit of the training.
Okay.
So you've joined the Navy, but this is the first ship that you're on. So the month-long training, what ship was it, and where was the training?
Okay, it's a good question. So the full cruise that we did was on the Carl Vinson. So I believe we did the workup on the Carl Vinson as well.
Which would make sense, right?
Yeah.
It's just you train, then you go.
Yeah, because we were also on the John C. Stennis, but I believe that was one more workup right before I got out. So, little foggy. It's been a couple years. But yeah, we go out, and that was the Carl Vinson. It's the ship that ended up dumping Bin Laden overboard many years later.
Also, what's interesting about that's an awesome nugget, is it was named after a congressman, Carl Vinson.
Yeah.
He was the first person to be able to see a ship dedicated to him as an alive person.
Oh, cool.
Which is kind of cool. And he was like big in the Navy,
Yeah.
so as far as like he was on naval affairs in the House or whatever, so it made sense. So it's this big, glorious, nuclear-powered, 1,060-foot-long city. So when you're on it, what's the first thing that goes through your head when you step foot on an aircraft carrier?
The size of it.
Yeah?
The size is like it's one of those things you're just like, I knew it was gonna be big, obviously, but when you get up to it, especially in port, it's pretty high up out of the water. But then you see just the sheer size of the damn thing, and like the size of the ropes and the chains and the ladder and the height and everything. You're just like,
Unlike anything you've ever seen.
yeah, you're just like, you're kidding me, right? Like it's amazing, and you get on it and you hear it for the first time, because there's all these rumbles and noises, and like you hear it creaking a bit, and like it's just taking in the whole experience of like all the senses, the sight, the sound, the smell, all that kind of stuff. It was fascinating. It was really, really cool. I wish you could experience it, and more people could. There's actually there's a museum down there in San Diego people can go on. It's a little bit smaller. That's the Midway.
I've been on that one.
Yeah.
And I agree, like standing on the deck,
Yeah.
you can't even imagine being in the middle of the Pacific Ocean with nothing around you. Because, all right, look, I can get off the ship. There's San Diego. I can go to the bar right down the street.
Right.
You're isolated on that boat, especially the further that you get out.
Yeah.
Did it feel that way despite the size of the Carl Vinson?
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's big. There's multiple gyms. There's multiple places to eat. There's, it's obviously huge, but yeah, it did. Like you get on it, and you just see that all the people keep coming on. You keep loading all the gear on. It keeps going somewhere. You keep loading it up, and then we go out to sea, and then the planes flew on. Because the ship has to be moving at a certain speed for the planes to land. Like they can't land if it's still, because it'll snap the tail hooks off and they'll literally crash. Like you can't do that. They have to match a certain speed. You don't match the speed, but it has to be going a certain speed to give them the right, science of speed and drag and all that kind of stuff to land and stop.
Thank God there's smart people to figure those things out.
But it was really, really cool to get down there and finally see it for the first time, and then go aboard and go through it. And even just like, walking up the stairs and just feeling the thing was like, it was so cool.
You mentioned that it's a functioning city if you're on an aircraft carrier. How many people are on it when you left. Where did you guys leave from San Diego?
We did.
So you leave from San Diego, you set off. Do you get to watch as you leave? Does everybody get to go up to the deck and go, bye, life, see you in 7 months?
Yeah. Yeah, we got to watch. And because
you get like uniform.
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
Like
yeah.
Think it would be.
Yeah, there's a thing called like manning the rails. So you can be up there for that, or you can watch. There's a couple different ways, but everyone got to see it. And I was pretty familiar with that part of San Diego and Coronado because I went there a ton of times as a kid with the family. My uncle had a boat there, so we would go all through there. And now we're going through on this thing, and there's like tugboats and police boats and like all this kind of stuff, like, helping us get out. And I remember like as you're finally leaving kind of like what would you even call it? Like the bay, and starting to go towards the open water, and it starts to go, that was another time where you're just like, all right, we're going. Like we're no longer in the bay, and I don't know where we're going, but we're just going that way. And I know we're not going to slow down. You know what I mean? So we got out there, and I don't know how many miles we went out, but we went out, and then the planes came on. So we recovered all the planes. We got them on board, and then we were like, cool, now we're a unit. Now we're ready to go. We've got all of our weapons, all of our planes, all of our people, and then we took off and went to our first stop was Guam.
Guam. So on the way to combat zone.
Yeah.
So this was a combat mission on the USS Carl Vinson at this point. Yeah. So you knew the Black Knights were going to fly over Afghanistan, I assume.
Yeah, we did Operation Iraqi Freedom. We did Global War on Terrorism were the two that we did.
So double. So you did both in the same mission.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. So you mentioned the flight deck.
Yep.
You're on the flight deck when the planes come. So your job starts when the planes are going to land for the first time once the ship gets moving.
Correct.
Okay. So you're like on the job like right away. So it's go time. So you've trained for this. You did your, what do you call it? Walk-up? Workup. So you did your workup. You did your month training. You did your month's training in California to make sure you knew how the planes operated. So you've got all your supplies. First time you're out at sea for the real deal, standing on the flight deck. What are you thinking?
It was badass.
Well, I'm more with Justin Cross here in just a moment. Listening is one of the most underrated communication skills. Listening provides you with information you can use to your advantage. You ask the right people, you get the right information, you get to make better decisions. But listening is just one of the many communication skills you'll hone in my communications and performance program called Master Your Message. Hi, I'm Rob Hunter. For the past 25 years, I've solely relied on my voice to share ideas, get buy-in, and influence. All of these skills, and then some, come in 8 hours worth of content spread over 8 modules where you'll sharpen your listening skills to use to your advantage. You'll also learn techniques to nail presentations, handle disputes, and how to use different communication styles with different people. What you say is your billboard. Broadcast wisely with Master Your Message. And it's not just me. Billionaire Richard Branson and the greatest investor of all time, Warren Buffett, preach that communication is the most important skill in business. So Master Your Message, the program, is designed to help you open the doors that you want to get a seat at the table you want. So take action now. Go to paintedporchstrategies.com/communication. paintedporchstrategies.com/communication, or check the show notes for a link to Master Your Message. Now back to Justin Cross on Equal Matters.
First time you're out at sea for the real deal, standing on the flight deck. What are you thinking?
It was badass. Like, it really was. Like, this is what I got excited about the Navy for, because I wanted to travel. I didn't want to be stuck, anywhere. I wanted to go be in the Navy. Like, I've always liked boats, and I like water, and I think world history and military history is fascinating. So now being in the Navy on an active warship and going out on a global cruise, it was freaking awesome. And for the first time you go and, the boat gets up to speed and you realize, oh, we're actually kind of cooking,
Yeah.
Like you look out and you see the water going by. That was one of my favorite things. Like in the hangar bay, there's big holes, if you will, in the wall that where the elevators are to go up to the flight deck to take planes up, right? And bring them down if needed for repairs. But you can see the water, so even if you're not on top, you can still see it a lot of the times. And it was really cool just to see that cooking by and you're like, man. And especially like when you realize like it doesn't stop, you're like, we're moving.
Well, it's unlimited power with the nuclear technology,
unlimited
too,
power,
which is fascinating.
Yeah, and then you think about where you're going, And one thing they did, which is really cool that I really appreciated, was they would call out on the speaker, like if we were passing certain things they wanted us to know about, like, hey, we're coming up on this site right here, these islands, this battle happened in World War II or, World War I or whatever. And X amount of, Navy ships and sailors were lost right here in these waters and, stuff like that. And you're watching it, you're like, damn, like we're just cruising by. At some point, this water was on fire. It was covered in oil. There was explosions. There was airplanes and machine guns and like craziness going on. And you just kind of like had a new sense of like what we were doing.
And kind of a reminder that the world keeps on turning and conflict in humans always happens.
Yeah.
So you're driving by conflict because you're going to conflict.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like, yeah, because at that particular time, in World War II, I think it was in this one instance, it was complete chaos in that exact spot. And then here we are now, a couple decades later, cruising by the same spot, not fighting there, but going to somewhere else to potentially go fight. Mm-hmm. We knew we were going to go fight, but you never know what you're getting into because we're a huge target out there, on an aircraft carrier too. So it's one of those things where like, you have a lot of trust in everybody you work with, and just everything. There's always a submarine with an aircraft carrier within a certain distance. Like we don't know what that is because it's all classified. But we travel with with our other ships, like the big gun ships. We have helicopters. We have a submarine. It's a whole unit. Like it's not just one ship going out there to go do its thing.
You're on your own. Good luck. You're going into foreign hostile waters.
Yeah, when you have 1,000-foot ship with 6,000 guys on it, 100 airplanes or something like that. There's a lot that goes into protecting that and making sure that everyone comes home.
Take me on the flight deck.
Yeah.
What is it like up there? I mean, I only know it from watching Top Gun, from documentaries, reading some memoirs about members of the military. It seems incredibly dangerous. It seems like there are many things that could go wrong.
Yep.
How true is that?
So the opening scene of the new Top Gun is good. Like if you want to get, we could watch that again. I watched it again the other day and I was like, this is actually this is it. Like there's an active flight deck.
It's what you used to do.
Yeah. So I was a green shirt and a green helmet. So it's a wild place because it's a flight deck, which means you can take off and land on it during flight operations times. But during other times when you're not flying, like there's stuff parked all over the place. So it's also like a parking lot. So it's a very packed, busy place. And sometimes when you look at it, you're like, we're going to operate out of here? Like it's packed. Like there's planes and bombs and tractors and like just shit all over the place, like it's organized, but it's like, there's a lot up here. So flight operations is one of the craziest things I've ever been a part of. And I loved it. They say it's the most dangerous job on the planet besides like active duty, like fighting combat. And I get that because, imagine how much movement is going on up there. Like, let's start with the ship, right? The ship is obviously moving. We're in flight ops, so the ship is going, I don't even know how fast. So it's just 20 miles an hour, whatever it is. It's moving.
Which is a huge ship to be moving at that speed.
Yeah, it might have been less, might have been more. I don't even know, but it's moving.
I think I saw the top speed is 35 miles per hour
something like
on the
that.
Carl Vinson, which is just insane. Through the water.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, even if you go 35 on a regular boat at Lake Powell or something like that, that's a decent speed.
Absolutely.
And now, like, you're cooking and you ain't stopping. You know what I mean?
No doubt.
So now that ship, it's moving. It's rocking back and forth a little bit. It's hitting some waves here and there. But we would usually stay in a pattern as well. Like, so we had an operating area. We wouldn't just cruise straight for 100 miles and launch planes. We would, stay within whatever our operating area was of X amount of miles. So every once in a while, the ship would turn. And when you turn a big ship like that, there is a large list. There's a large, change of the angle of the deck. And so this is where you have to get they call it your sea legs, because as the first couple of times you're walking through the hangar, it's fun. And it's funny because you're kind of like hopping, like, like sometimes like your foot over here is real heavy and other times there's like nothing there and you're kind of coming up and you're getting your sea legs. But after a while, like you'd be in a huge banking turn and you wouldn't even notice it. I remember one time I looked up at the horizon and I'm like, what is going on? Because the horizon's flat, but the ship was like, at an extreme, like 30-degree angle or something. I was like, what the hell? And I looked down and sure enough, my legs were wide and, holding myself up. I didn't even know I was doing it.
So you got your sea legs.
Yeah. So that's one. So that's one element to the flight deck. So we'll build up on what it's like being on an operational flight deck there. So that's happening all the time. The ship's always moving. But then during flight operations, a lot of the planes are on, right? They have to be launched, and they're fighter jets. They have dual engines. Some of them they have two engines. Helicopters are potentially on. Like, there's a lot of noise. And with fighter jets, there's a lot of exhaust. There's a lot of propulsion going on. So as these planes start to, leave their parking spots to go over to the catapult to be launched, that exhaust, as the plane is turning, is getting fanned in any different direction that you can imagine around the plane or around the flight deck, right? So if the plane is pointing right or straight and it needs to go right, as it turns, imagine where that exhaust swoops.
And that exhaust will burn you.
Burn wasn't too much of the issue, but it was knocking you over or blowing you off the flight deck was the issue.
Makes sense. Powerful stuff. Yep.
Powerful shit, for sure. So, we were covered head to toe. So leather steel toe boots, long camo pants, tool belt, and then I would carry an encryption bag. It had the codes for the radio because everything's encrypted, So our communications and our, all that stuff can't be hacked into. It's all in secure private network for, just our military. And then you'd have a long sleeve turtleneck on, gloves, your float coat, and then a cranial, we call it. It's basically a helmet with goggles. So the only thing that's really showing is kind of like your chin. Everything else is covered, right? So you don't have to worry too much about getting like burned by the exhaust. But if you get too close to it and you're not paying attention, it'll send you like a tumbleweed. And you could run into something else. You could get ran over. You could get blown off the side. You could just fall down and break an arm or a kneecap or something. Because the other nice thing fun thing about the aircraft flight deck is it's called non-skid. So what do you think like the top would be? It would be like?
I would almost think it would be like a street, like a road, like it's like almost asphalt, so the planes can come and go.
Right. That would be nice. Yeah.
So it's not that.
No. So how would I describe this? What a rhino liner is like in the bed of a truck?
Oh, yeah,
like the spray in? It's kind of like that, but very thick and coarse, and it stands up like sometimes like half an inch.
Wow.
Or an inch. And it's kind of like if you were to put kind of like this carpet. If you have a big shag carpet and you were to run your fingers or a rake through it, imagine it would start to make some lines. So some parts would be kind of flattish and some would be sticking up in ridges, like little mohawks. It's kind of like that. And it's hard and it's crazy. So we need it like that because, the ship moves so much. There's water up there. Sometimes it rains or you know what I mean? Like so it's called non-skid. But what happens with that is it's sharp. So if you put your knee down, it'll cut your pants and shred your knee or your hand or anything. So you do not want to fall down.
So you have to be careful every step you take.
Every step, yeah. So that's why like getting blown over or like might not sound like the biggest thing, but if you fall down and you catch yourself with your knees and your elbow, that might require stitches. That might really jack you up and keep you from being able to work. So you really have to keep your head on a swivel to make sure one, you don't get in the way of, the jets and stuff because you'll just get kicked off the flight deck. And two, you don't hurt yourself or somebody else. So it's a wild thing. So now the ship is moving, the planes are moving, the exhaust is being sprayed everywhere. And one of my jobs, we talked about being avionics. Sometimes I'd have to hook up to the plane and talk to the pilot if he had like a radio issue or if he had like something going on with his codes or something like that I could fix for him. But my other job was a final checker. So I would then go with the airplane from the parking spot over to the catapult. And I was one of the guys that would ensure that it was connected to the catapult the right way, do a final check of everything, the tires, make sure the doors are shut, make sure there's nothing wrong with the bombs or the missiles or anything like that. And then if you remember like the Top Gun movies, they get down, the guys that do the symbol, like when it's ready to go, I was one of those guys like right at the edge of the wing before it went. So I actually would walk with the plane, and this is where you had to get really good navigating all the stuff on the flight deck, because I'm now going with this plane as it goes all these different directions, getting around other planes and moving to the catapult. And so sometimes, you'd have to get really good with ducking underneath the exhaust, or you'd have to know which planes you could do that to, which ones you couldn't, where the tail hook was. Because if you went too far under the plane, under the tail hook, that was a huge red flag. You can get kicked off for that. But I loved it because I got to be right next to the exhaust as it would crank up to like afterburner to go take off of the catapult. So it was a blast. I loved doing flight operations because it was kind of risky, but it was exciting. It was fun. We drink gallons of water all day without going to the bathroom because you're just sweating it all out. Is wild.
You have to develop, I imagine, a really good amount of trust up there, not only for your safety, but with the pilot, because the pilot is relying on you to do all the things right so that his takeoff and his landing is as perfect or as close to perfect as can be.
That's right.
So is that part of the training? You get to know the pilots. Do you work with the same pilots, or is it just different, but you get to know them all because it's all part of the same squadron?
Yeah, you get to know them. But, just like any other, unit, like some people would retire at certain times. People would have different orders at different times. So there was always people in maintenance and in the pilot section that would come and go. But, when you're on cruise, no one's typically leaving for the most part, So you would get to know them all really well. But yeah, absolutely. Like one, you have to trust the pilot that he's like, because a lot of the stuff we would do if we had to go underneath the plane or open a door while it's running to look at something, that you tell them hands off. And so they'd put their hands up, typically up on the sill, because if they move a flight control surface or do something, it could literally kill you or knock you out or really injure you. So you trust them that they're doing their thing. But imagine the trust the pilot has to put in their ground crew.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy. Like, I'm about to go up in this fighter jet to go fly over the ocean and then go fly over Iraq or Afghanistan and all this kind of stuff. And I'm really hoping that Justin did the right job on that wire. Or I'm really hoping that guy did the safety wire on my brake stack correctly. So that thing, doesn't come apart on me when I land and I crash and die. You know what I mean? So It's a huge amount of trust all around, which also makes it really fun because now you have to have good pride, take a lot of pride in your job, and if there was definitely people that did not cut it on the flight deck. They were either just, maybe they were scared or, they didn't have the pep in their walk when they needed it and they were a safety risk. Or they just didn't have the situational awareness, which not everybody does.
Right.
You probably know somebody that Godzilla could be eating the neighbor and they would just be like, I didn't see anything. I was just on Twitter, or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Super focused on my task.
Yeah. But it's like, dude, how do you not see that shit?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
What are you paying attention to?
Yeah. So there was just some people that weren't cut out to be there. But once we kind of got it all sorted out and, they went and did other jobs, it became a lot of fun working up there.
So so that's funny you mentioned fun. So in the last episode of Equal Matters, my brother and my father and I were driving across the country. And I asked my dad while we were driving, recorded it, about his time in the Navy. And he told us the story, the first time he landed on an aircraft carrier. I was like, what was it like? Scary.
Yeah.
And my dad's not the type of guy who gets scared pretty easily.
Yeah.
But I can imagine, he says, you're seeing the aircraft carrier from 8 miles out. And you're looking at it and you're like, we're going to land on that thing? And one of the times it was pouring rain. Still has to land the plane. And I think when they landed, he said there were 4 cables. Is that true that you can catch on?
Yeah, 3 or 4.
Okay, so they caught the last.
Yeah, 4 wires.
I think it was what they caught the last one on the left side, so they barely hung on.
Yeah.
And then the next day when they were getting to leave, he's the flight engineer, so he calculates the weight. He gives it to the crew, but the crew put the wrong weight in the catapult.
Yep.
So they catapult off, and they immediately went down.
Yep.
And luckily, there's enough room there where the pilot was able to pull up. Any incidents like that? Because I think that really spells the danger of what it's like up there. And you guys are standing there, not just with the exhaust, but while the planes are landing, you're still on the flight deck.
Oh, yeah. So one of the stories that you always hear in boot camp and as you're training to work on these planes is the danger of the wire. That's what we call them, the 4 wires. And they're actually thick cables. They're probably, if I had to imagine, 1.5 inch, 2 inch thick steel cables. They're huge, right? Well, they would tell us about stories where, it doesn't happen that often, I don't believe, but it has happened before where kind of what you just said, the wrong, weight would be assigned to it. Like they would say, hey, this plane is coming in. He weighs, I'll just make up a random number, 10,000 pounds, right? But he'd actually come in at 20 or 30,000 pounds and there would not be enough tension on that wire and it would snap it. Oof. And when that happens, you can imagine what happens when you snap a rubber band. it goes somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Well, when it does that, it takes off legs. It kills people. Like it's bad, right? And we would stand, as we're waiting for the planes to land. Like if your dad or whoever was in a plane, we'd be standing there, maybe hands on our float coat, like right next to the wire. Like there's these big kind of like spool looking things that they come out of, and you literally just be standing next to it. And a bunch of times, especially when you're new, you're just like, don't do this. You know what I mean? Just you do the right thing. Like I do not want to be a part of the next story where, the wire snapped on the USS Carl Vinson and, took out 6 guys. Like I don't want to be one of those guys. So it's wild. But dude, there are so many things that happen out at sea. Like they say, like basically someone dies on every cruise. Definitely true on ours. We had 2 pilots that crashed and didn't come back. But we're up there on the flight deck all the time. So you can see like which pilots are struggling and which ones are good. And I remember one time there was I think it was an E2 Hawkeye was coming in to land, and he was kind of moving a bit, and he, long story short, looked like he was going to smoke into the back of the ship. Like he
just miss the deck.
Yeah, like he was like too low almost. And he hit the back of it, he landed. But as we're watching, that one particular time, was like, dude, if he had hit that thing and like exploded, those propellers and everything are just coming right at us. Like, it was just wild.
So everything has to be dialed in.
Everything's got to be dialed in.
Hence all the training.
Yeah, and also why every sailor is also a fireman. Because if there's a fire, you don't call the fire department. Like, there are guys up there that are trained for that. But, like, everyone has to know how to fight a shipboard fire. So, like, this whole time, like, as the planes are landing and taking off and you're doing your thing, you're just, like you're on it. Like, like, you're messing around a little bit, but, like, you're just, especially as you come in, like, all right, where do I need it? What am I going to do if something goes wrong? Am I going to run over here? Am I going to go over there? Where is this thing? And where is that thing? How am I going to be able to help? And it's the whole time it's kind of a controlled chaos. Like, it's pretty wild.
Did you think about how dangerous this was while you were up there often, or are you just in the zone because you're so well trained and you're so well disciplined?
It's both. Like, I'm definitely in the zone because I really enjoyed this part. Like, I liked it. But at the same time, the reason that you're so alert and that you're being so mindful of where you're walking with the plane and doing is because there's the potential to be hurt, or to have something go wrong. And even if you're not worried about getting hurt too much, you don't want to be kicked off and have to go work in the freaking kitchen or something.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So, like, the whole time, like, you're very aware of doing a good job and making sure you don't get hurt, but you're also like, you're doing that because you really don't want to get hurt.
Yeah.
And also, dude, all sorts of crazy things happen at sea. We had a speedboat sneak up on us one time. We had a helicopter sneak up on us one time, like, not ours.
Where were you at?
I think this was in the Gulf.
Yeah, so the Persian Gulf.
Yeah.
So an active war zone. So you're parking in the Persian Gulf, or the ship's always moving, right? Because you can't just be sitting there. So you're moving. Ships are taking off. They're going to drop their bombs. They're coming back.
Yeah.
So this is a war zone. So the Persian Gulf, you've got all those countries that aren't always so friendly to America. So a speedboat comes up and a helicopter comes up.
Yeah.
Where are you when both of those things happened? Do you remember?
Yep. So on a speedboat, I was on the flight deck, just
Wow.
doing my thing, doing whatever. And I look up and there's a flare coming over the port side, the left side, right? Like a flare. And that's something you never see. So you're like, what the heck is that? You know what I mean? Like, this is different. And I was in the back of the ship where our jets were. And up in the front of the ship, I see people start to run over towards where the flare came from. And I was like, all right. So we all ran over to the same side. And right as I get there and I look down, there's like a big white kind of like offshore racing boat. It's probably, if I had to guess, like a 40 to 50 foot, like kind of like a power boat, something you might see at like Lake Havasu.
It goes really, really fast.
Yeah, it was like, but it was all white, kind of like a drug running boat you might see in Miami, something like that. And it just had one Middle Eastern guy in it, and like we could see him clear as day. He's right there, right? Wow. And he was very close to the ship, like going right alongside it. And so he goes to the back and hits the gas, and he starts to leave. Well, one of our helicopters was already in the air because we always have helicopters flying during flight ops, and they went
as a protection measure, I imagine.
Yeah, for this kind of reason, right? And so he kind of swooped out of nowhere, the helicopter, and kind of like sat on top of this ship, close. I don't know, maybe 10 feet above him or so, and matched his speed. And we were just like, plug it. We wanted to put a 50 cal through it, to sink him. But they stayed on it until we left our line of sight. We always like to like hope that, they sunk it afterwards. But we don't know what happened after that.
I'm surprised the helicopter pilots didn't come back. Don't worry, guys. We took care of it. We just so you guys couldn't see it. It's all good.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it is war, right? I mean,
totally.
This is no joke.
And that was a warning.
And USS Cole happened in 2000, where a boat like that, loaded with explosive, just rammed into the side of the USS Cole.
That is like probably exactly what he was implying. Like, hey, this boat could have been filled with, X amount of explosives, and he 100% could have rammed it into us. That was just a test, or that was just a warning. If you can shoot a flare over the bow of a boat and drive right next to it, you can run into it for sure. Like somebody, I don't know how it happened. Someone probably got their ass chewed for that. But like that was a major thing that we realized, oh damn, like, yeah, we're out here having fun and doing our thing, but like we are also a major target. Like we're chasing the guys out there on land, and we're the ones dropping bombs and doing shows of force and stuff with the airplanes, but they're also looking for us.
No doubt.
And another time, I wasn't up there at the times. I was down below. My good friend Josh Connell was up top, and he was hooked up to a plane, talking to a pilot. And kind of out of nowhere, they heard oh my God, it's an American warship.
Whoa.
Something like that. And they're like, what the fuck? So the pilots are looking around like, what is that? And there was an Iranian helicopter.
What? And
it just, I probably flew right above the water, somehow snuck in under radar somehow. And like they came up to see, and I'm assuming they knew that it was an American warship, but they were just trying to act surprised, so we didn't like blow them out of the air, But that could have been another one. They could have flown that right into the ship.
Or just launched a missile, which has happened. It happened in the 80s, I think.
Dropped
Iran.
a bomb.
Yeah,
shot
absolutely.
Something. Mm-hmm. Shot a missile, took a couple machine gun shots, whatever, something. So that was wild. And then there's multiple other times. Like you would imagine, like in the middle of the ocean, there's not too many like other boats. There's a lot of crickety, crappy looking like little tiny boats out there. And they say they're fishermen and stuff like that, but a lot of them were just also like, well, then why are you so close? So, they'd be from the ship, they'd be yelling, hey, this is a USS, whatever, like you are, whatever, basically get the hell away from us. And other times they'd send a helicopter and they go sit on top of that, but they can't run away. So the water's just flowing into it. And like, it's just, they're blowing their shit all over the place, just like wreck their day, But a lot of them are out there and they're doing recon and surveillance. They're taking pictures and they're sending back locations to where the ship is and all that. So it's like anything that comes near us is a potential issue.
Absolutely.
So the submarine is always somewhere. They're always watching underwater. They're always looking for stuff. And then the helicopters and our own radar towers and stuff, they're always trying to keep, tabs on what's going on. But man, so much stuff happens out there. It's amazing.
You get used to the danger?
Yeah.
Because if it's multiple incidents, right, you're 7 months on this ship, it happens probably, like you said, a fair amount. So you're on the flight deck every day, so there's a danger in that. And all the multiple dangers you explain there.
Yeah.
Plus the maybe not constant threat of attack, but anytime you see something, there is that threat of being attacked.
Yeah, and you don't get a lot of time to really process that though, because like, for example, the day where like the speedboat came by with a flare, once that was over, like we didn't like stop operations or anything. Like we still like did our job and launched the planes and recovered them and did
Trust
our thing.
them
and
to take care of that if necessary.
And then before you know it, it was just kind of like you just keep doing your thing. So it probably wasn't even until like a while later, like times like this where I think about it, like, man, that could have been really bad. But at the time, it was just like, that was weird. Someone's on it. A helicopter went with him. Like, that's their job. Keep doing your job.
But I got to fix this plane real quick.
Yeah, so you don't really think too much into it,
Mm-hmm. What is life like on an aircraft carrier? So it's a city. It's over 1,000 feet long. There are 6,000 people on it.
Yeah.
The lifestyle is like, because you're mostly working. You mentioned at the very beginning, 12 on, 12 off.
Yeah.
7 days a week. So you're mostly working. What do you do when you're not working on an aircraft carrier?
You work out.
You work out.
Yeah.
Hence why Earn It All Academy came to be, working out on an aircraft carrier.
That's right.
So is that like, okay, I did my 12 hours. Now I'm going to go work out, or do you do it before, or does it just vary?
The way it's supposed to work is you work your shift for 12 hours. You get lunch breaks and stuff like that. And then when you're off of work is when you would go to the gym, you'd shower, and then like you could, do what you wanted. You could play cards or read a book or go to sleep or, do stuff like that. We would all, of course, try to get our workouts in during our time, if at all possible.
Yeah, sure.
Because that way afterwards, because like it's a constant search for food. Like, we can talk about food. It's
well, again, you're a floating city.
Yeah.
So like you can just replenish supplies whenever you want.
Not whenever you want, but we do underway replenishments, which is pretty amazing.
Underway replenishments.
Yeah. But to answer your question though, like, you'd work for 12 hours and then you'd have 12 hours kind of to yourself. And you would eat, you would shower, you would maybe write, emails or a letter home or, something like that. But then a good chunk of that is sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
You try to get good sleep so you can go do it again the next day.
What are the sleeping arrangements on an aircraft carrier?
On an aircraft carrier, we have berthings. They're big rooms with bunk beds. So mine is like you basically go through all these aisles of beds, and you would get to your spot. There was maybe like 3 feet between bunk beds, right? And so you'd have 2 on the bottom, 2 probably at waist level, and then 2 at the top, like kind of at shoulder level, if I remember correctly. So I had a top one on the right.
You get to pick that. You're like, I'm taking this one.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, kind of. Like you knew where you were, and it was kind of like, kid, get in there, go find your spot or whatever. I don't think they were assigned. It was just kind of like, go figure it out, right?
Yep.
And we kind of stayed by, the guys we worked with in our shop, pretty close by. But it was nice having the one on top because there wasn't like a ceiling like the middle and the lower ones. Because there's not a lot of room. So it was nice because on the top ones, you could sit up. Or if you imagine you're in the middle ones, like it's kind of like a coffin, like there's no sitting up. Like you sit up like there's a ceiling there, So you basically have your own bed. You don't have to share it like you do in a submarine or anything like that. So you could lift it up. You had your own little locker where you could put your, snacks and clothes and shit like that. But I slept really good on the aircraft carrier, I think because of the movement.
Ah,
yeah,
it's like sway.
Yeah, so you put earplugs in, and I slept great on the aircraft carrier.
Where was your, did you say it was a berthing? What is it called?
Berthing.
Berthing.
Yeah.
Where was your berthing located on the ship?
It was the back of the ship, right by our shops. So your squadron is essentially assigned a certain area of the ship. So we are right below our jets. So that way, no matter what happened, like you could get out. Our shop was right there. Our jets were right here. Like you just kind of stayed in the same area. The gym that we went to, for the most part, was in the very front of the ship. So we would travel the whole ship, and walk over there. But they have it arranged pretty nicely to where you kind of stay in the same spot, so you can always be effective with your job.
Can you walk the ship whenever you want, though?
Yeah.
Just walk back and forth.
Oh, yeah.
Did you do that?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to get lost and, just go see different areas, go climb over here, go down over there, get to an area like, oh shit, I'm not supposed to be here, but yeah, it is a blast.
You mentioned Donnie that you went to boot camp with. He is on the ship too, right?
Yeah.
How did that work out? And how did you know, hey, Donnie, what's up?
I'm trying to remember how I found out. Might have been like a phone call or a text message or something like that when we found out where we were going, I think. Or I think I might have maybe even known that he was on the Carl Vinson, and then we got assigned to the Carl Vinson. So it was like, hey, are you still on it? What are you doing type thing?
Yeah.
He worked on the, I'm trying to remember. I think it might have been the arresting gear system.
Which is what?
Are those wires that the planes have to catch when they land on top. So there's some of the guys that have to set the right pressure and the right weight, so as a plane's coming in, they'll say, hey, this is a F-18, 2-seater, it weighs this much. And they would do their calculations and they would set the wires to be ready to catch that plane. That's what he worked on. I don't believe his catapult. I think his arresting gear. So then I was able to go down there and see him. He showed me the system, showed how it worked. And,
nice.
It was pretty cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
How did people get along on a big ship of 6,000 people?
That's a great question. When you work with somebody 24/7, like imagine like 7 months, you do everything at the same time as some certain people, right? So you sleep very close proximity to someone, wake up, use the same shower area, then you eat together, you go to work for 12 hours, then afterwards you go to the gym together, and you go back to the same shower area, back to the same sleeping area. After a while, like everybody gets on everybody's nerves. And at some point, everyone is like, has a beef with somebody or is trying to fight each other for some reason.
And it's mostly men on an aircraft carrier.
Yeah, mostly men. Yeah, I would say probably 99% men.
Yeah.
You know,
Like, can you imagine being like the 4 women on it? They're like, oh my God, get me off this ship.
I would not recommend it. Yeah. I would not recommend it. And it's not that like they're abused or anything, but it's just
A lot of testosterone.
a lot of testosterone, and they typically, a lot of them, you know, there's a lot of challenges with being a woman in that environment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There really is. But yeah, so like, you know, to answer your question, it's kind of like being in a fraternity and also kind of being in prison. You know, so like you get close with you know, your real close handful of guys. But a lot of those guys you end up at some point like getting in a fight with,
Sure.
and then you get over it, you know, and move on. But then like as we would kind of go through the ship, like we were in the back of the ship and the gym was in the front. So me and my buddies that I would go to the gym with, we'd have to walk all the way through the ship, you know, and there were sometimes like we'd be going through these certain area of a certain squadron where there were some guys that we didn't like them and they didn't like us. Nobody knew why, but it was
just human behavior. It's
just
cliquey.
one of those things, you know. Like you're just walking by and you're just stupid motherfucker.
Yeah.
And you're like,
I'm like, damn.
What? Yeah.
Dang, man, we all trying to kill
Yeah.
Al Qaeda right now.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
yeah, like what the heck, you know? And so then like we'd say some stuff back, and it was just kind of like this kind of turned into like a prison gang type thing for no reason, you know. Where, you know, we'd go to the gym sometimes and they'd be playing some music, but you know, when me and my guys would come in, we would go to the stereo and we would stop whatever's on and put in Pantera, you know, was it Far Beyond Strength or Strength Beyond Strength album? I forget the name of it right now. And we just blast what we want. And that didn't always sit with everybody, but like we didn't care. Like this is our time in the gym. So it's a very alpha type situation that I imagine is a lot like prison in some ways.
Plus, you are trapped in a certain
You're not
structure.
going anywhere.
Yep.
Yeah.
You can't get off it.
Right.
Can't get on it.
Right.
You're there. You're there.
Yeah. But, you know, like you said, we're all there for the same mission. So it's also a lot of fun. You know, we hit different ports and we go out and we go party. We go explore different countries and stuff. And it was a really unique, again, fun experience.
What ports of entry? You mentioned Guam was the first stop. So
Yeah.
was it typically you stopped for a couple of days, they managed the ship, they refueled, not that they needed to refuel it in the traditional sense, just with provisions. If you guys needed more tires for the jets, is this what you do in the ports? And then you guys get to go out and let off some steam?
I don't know if we did too much logistics when we would park and get off. I think it was more for morale. You know, because like again,
You're stuck on a ship.
because they know
like a
at
prison.
some point it's just going to implode if people don't get to go have fun and
Yeah, with
do
12 on,
something.
12 off, 12 on, 12
Yeah.
off, 7 days a week. Combat,
Yeah.
combat,
All-
dangerous
pretty
stuff.
much all men in their 20s and 30s and 40s. Like eventually, it's just going to light on fire. You know, like it's just going to happen. You know. So yeah, we went to Guam, which is amazing. Did some deep sea fishing.
Nice.
Just had a great time. Everybody got sunburned because it's like right on the equator. You know.
And you're on the water, so
So-
the sun's reflecting off the water
Yeah.
at you and from the sun.
Some
directly.
of the wildest sunburns. Like here in Arizona, we don't nothing compared to what happens in Guam.
Wow.
People would get burned so bad they'd have these bubbles like the size of grapefruits on them.
Wow.
Or I saw some guys' heads the whole head would swell to where they couldn't even see because their whole head was basically a blister.
Wow.
Like some of the gnarliest stuff I've ever seen.
Ah.
So like, I just got regular sunburn, but some people like, because I also grew up in Arizona, you know, so I had sunscreen on. I was, you know, I was
Prepared.
tan a little bit, you know.
Yep.
But some guys, you know, that came from friggin' Minnesota or something, and then went down to the equator in Guam, just turned into aliens. Like it was, like just bubbled heads and faces. It was insane. So that was Guam. Guam was awesome. It's kind of like Hawaii. But along the way, we stopped in Bahrain, Dubai, Rhodes, Greece, which is kind of like the Hawaii of the Greek
Really?
of Greece, so like an island. Yep. We hit Singapore, and I think Portugal. It was amazing. Like you got to see all those, but it's typically for 3-4 days, something like that for the most part.
So different from Japan because it's quick. So
yeah.
you get off the ship, and did you guys have a plan of attack? Was it just let's just go out and eat and let's party and let's have a good time?
Basically, because you know, sometimes you would have to like stay back for a day and be on watch. They'd call it, you know. So there was usually some maintenance that would still go on the planes. They would try to reduce that a lot, but some people had to stay on the ship obviously to make sure it was secure and you know cleaned and stuff like that. So it depends. You might get to go for the full days, or you might have to stay back for one day, or you know something like that. But it was normally set up to where the people that were in trouble or they were messing up on cruise, they would typically be the ones that would have to stay back. And so it was nice. So I think there was maybe only one day out of one of the ports where I was working. It was just my luck, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we would kind of look up where we were going. Like we had some internet. It was really slow. Like, you know,
Especially back then.
Nothing crazy.
2003-ish.
Yeah. So we'd kind of huddle around a computer, you know, and somebody would drive and we would say, all right, cool. We're going to Rhodes, Greece. What does Google say about Rhodes, Greece?
Nice.
You know? And so we'd go look at it and be like, oh, cool. Topless beaches, you know, homemade pasta, you know, it's kind of like the Hawaii, like sweet, you know? And so we would just land. And one of the things that I always like to do is with my guys is we would land and almost right away get in a cab and just go away. 30 minutes, an hour away, something like that, because we didn't want to see all the same stuff everyone else did. We wanted to go try to get some of the real culture and find the good spots and not the touristy type stuff. You know?
Anything that stood out to you, you would recommend that someone might do in Greece, or if you ever end up in Bahrain?
Yeah, so Greece had some of the best homemade pastas out there. The gyros and the Greek salads, you know, the fresh cucumber, onions, tomatoes, feta.
You got to see why people that live there live to be like 105.
It was so good. Yeah, yeah. So the food is amazing in Greece. The water was great. Topless beaches and stuff. So that was always fun. I think I was 20 at the time,
Yeah.
you know, and you're like, all right, yeah,
Yeah,
Greece.
I'm going to check that out.
I like Greece, you know. This is cool.
And it's a different culture, too, where it's like, that's more normal.
Yeah.
So it's,
totally.
It's people that you wouldn't mind seeing with
Right.
their tops off.
Oh yeah, totally. It wasn't like, you know, just nasty old, you know, perverts, you know. It was just like this regular, you know, 20s and 30s and 40s, you know, like it was cool. But like you said, it was normalized. So like there wasn't anything, it wasn't even like a sexual thing. Like after, like, for us right away, it's like, oh, cool. But, you know, but like.
We're sailors.
Yeah.
We're on a boat with
then you just
men.
realize like, no, these people are just, you know, trying to get some sun. And
Exactly.
this is just what they
I
do.
don't like tan lines.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I really liked about Rhodes, Greece was we could see the ship anchored from the island.
Oh, cool.
So a lot of the times it would go into port or it would, you know, and then we'd go far away and we'd have to find our way back to it. But I remember we were sitting on the beach in Greece, you know, just laying on the beach or whatever, and you could see the ship right there. And
That's my home for now.
It was massive.
Yeah.
And it was the coolest thing to be like, I rode here on that, you know?
That is cool.
Like, that was badass.
What other unique experiences did you have aboard an aircraft carrier, the USS Carl Vinson, sailing across the world for a combat mission for 7 months?
Well, you asked about Bahrain. Actually, no, Dubai is where this happened. So we got off in Dubai and went to like this water park. I forget what it's called, but we're in the water park and we look up and there's a helicopter landing on this crazy looking building. It looks like a sail. It was
yeah.
You know what it's called?
I can't remember offhand.
It's either Verge or Burj Al Arab.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. So it was at the time, it was the world's only 7-star hotel.
Wow.
Like the only one in the world, right? And so we're watching this thing. And they're like, wow, that's incredible, right? And so we go back to our hotel and we go into the basement. There's like a bar, an Irish bar or something. And we're just down there having some drinks, you know, just BSing, just doing whatever. And we end up talking to this guy that's a drone submarine operator, I think for Raytheon or something. So you meet all sorts of crazy people overseas, right? And long story short, he's like, hey, you guys ever heard of the Verge or Burge, whatever it's called? I'm probably butchering the name. And we're like, yeah. And he's like, you guys want to go there? And we're like, what do you mean? You know? And he's like, I know some people. I'll take you there. And I'm like, yeah, of course we do. You know,
We would like to see this. Yes.
and this was after, you know, we had already lived in Japan. We were on a world cruise. We're going to do anything. You know, like, we're not going to say no to something. Like, there was no, like, oh, I don't know, it might be a creepy guy. We don't care. We'll just kill him if he ends up being weird. You know what I mean?
Fine.
Yeah, whatever. Like,
It's more of us than
yeah,
him.
one dude is not going to be a threat to, you know, to the four. I think we went with 3 or 4 guys, right? And so he takes us there, and on the way, he's making phone calls and stuff, and we're getting there, and I was wearing a T-shirt because we had just, you know, we were in the bar, and I was wearing a T-shirt, but you can't wear a T-shirt at this hotel.
Oh.
So he calls ahead, and they had like a jacket waiting for me, kind of like a black, you know, like a suit jacket kind of.
Nice.
And so we get there, and it was unbelievable. I mean, you could look straight up through the middle of the thing, all the way up at all the rooms. Huge fish tanks going up the escalators and everything. But we get to the top of this thing, and he orders like wine and cigars and all this stuff. So we're having a good time. And he's like, "Hey, you want to meet the Crown Prince?" And we're like, again, like What are you talking about?
Yeah.
He was there. The prince was at this bar at this world's only 7-star hotel in Dubai. And we got to meet him, which like we couldn't shake his hand, but we walked by and did like a nod, and he acknowledged us, and he said something and just told us who we were. And it was kind of like a, cool, like a head nod type thing. But we got to meet the Prince of Dubai.
How about that?
It was wild.
That is wild.
And then we standing over there. So we walked by after that, and we're standing up against the glass and just overlooking, Dubai and the ocean and everything, because it's on the water. It's on its own little island. And it was just one of those moments. It was just like, this is wild.
Way better than college.
Yeah. And out of that entire ship with 6,000 guys on it, there was like us 3 or 4. I forget who it was. I think it was Frank and Jason, maybe one other guy. I don't even remember right now. But it was just like, out of all those guys, we are the ones doing this. And we just met the Crown Prince, and we're smoking cigars and drinking wine at the fanciest hotel bar in the world. And I, what's weird is like, now that I think about it, I have a knack, it seems, to like find myself in getting into situations like that sometimes. It seems like no matter what we have going on, I always find myself kind of in these places where it's like, how in the world did we make this happen?
Sometimes you just got to say yes.
Yeah. And sometimes it's exactly, it's saying yes and just believing that you can make it happen.
Absolutely. First time I ever shot a gun, random dude who called my radio show in New Orleans, was like, you've never fired a firearm before? I'll take you out. I'm like, all right. I'm like, who does that?
Yeah.
I'm like, you do. I do.
Yeah.
Because why not?
Cool.
It's fun.
Yeah.
So what else? So you mentioned this.
Yeah.
You went swimming in the Persian Gulf off the back of the USS Carl Vinson.
Right.
What was that like?
That was, again, another really cool thing, right? So it's called a swim call. So they anchor the ship out, wherever, somewhere in a deemed safe spot. So this is the first time we're not moving, because normally we keep moving because we want to be a moving target. Well, they cleared it however they did. They made it safe. And they're like, hey, swim call. If you guys want to swim, you can swim. So I was like, yeah, cool. Of course we're doing it. I'm going to do anything, I'll freaking cannonball off this thing if you let me,
Nice.
And so, they made you wear a shirt, which is kind of dumb, because they were starting to get to a point in the Navy then where it's not as cool to be in the Navy as it was before. Because we saw, before it was like, they were wearing bell bottoms, no shirts, big mustaches, everyone's smoking cigarettes. I'm like, like that was
It's like my dad's era
yeah,
in the Navy.
Yeah, exactly. That was cool, Where here, you had to wear shorts. I think you had to wear shoes too, probably because, still working on whatever. But you had to wear shirts too. And it was like, I don't know, whatever. But anyways, long story short, you get in line to go swim, and they have this big, like a billboard, kind of like a sign that says, a list of things that can kill you in this water. It's titled just like that, things in this water that can kill you. And I was like, what? And it's everything, they had like sharks, barracudas, poisonous snakes, and then urchins and jellyfish and all this kind of stuff. And, you're standing in line watching it. We're laughing at it. You're like, well, yeah, that would suck. But, we're going in the water.
Can't say no.
Yeah.
I can't say yes.
So they didn't let you like cannonball off or, do anything like that. But they lowered the elevators. So these elevators are huge. If I had imagined, they're probably 100 feet by like 40 feet,
Wow.
And they're meant for taking, I think they can take at least 2, if not 3 or 4 airplanes from the hangar up to the deck or the deck down to the hangar. So they lowered it to the hangar deck level, and they put these massive like rope ladders, not even a ladder, but just like rope net, I should say, hanging off the side of it.
Something you see in like a Spartan race.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Something like that. So, multiple guys could climb it at one time. And so when it was your turn, I went with my buddies. I forget how many, maybe 3 or 4 of us. And you start to go over the side and you grab onto the rope, and they have divers in the water and stuff. And at a certain point, they said, all right, okay, you can jump from there if you want,
Okay.
And so as soon as we could, we launched off. I don't think it was very far. It was probably like, 10 or 15 feet, 12 feet, something like that. Nothing, maybe 20. I don't even know. Nothing too crazy. But, you jump down in the water. And here's a really cool, interesting thing. When you hit the water, you realized why people get lost at sea. Because they had the ship positioned a certain way with the ocean, with the tide and everything, to where you didn't even really have to swim to the back. Because we went off probably about mid-ship. And then so we had to get to the back, which is where the entry point was. But you were floating back there all you really had to do was kind of swim towards the ship a little bit more because, the hangar or the elevator is hanging out off the side. But you realize that ocean is cooking. Like, it's moving fast. And so they had, like, divers and swimmers and stuff to, like, if somebody missed, they'd help you get back on the ship. But it was just like that, you got to drop in and you got to kind of laugh and splash each other a bit and just realize you're in the middle of the Persian Gulf and this is probably the craziest place I'm ever going to swim in my life.
No doubt.
And then you get back on the ship and you're fired up, you high five and.
Well, it's like a big morale boost.
Yeah, it was a blast. Oh yeah, totally why they do that.
Because again, right, there is a nice balance there. It seems like where you get to have some experiences that are unique because you're traveling on an aircraft carrier that make the 12-hour day, 7 days a week worth it.
Oh, yeah. Huge morale boost. Same with, like, crossing the equator. We cross the equator, and so there's a big ceremony you do in the Navy. When you do that, you go from being what they call a polywog, which is like a scum, like just piece of crap, like just lives on the bottom of the ocean. You're not worth anything. But then you cross the equator, and you become a shellback. And now you're like a shellback sailor.
Nice.
You have to go through Davy Jones' whole ceremony and all this kind of stuff. And that was another kind of like day off where we kind of got to do some fun stuff. That was cool too.
So that's a good balance there.
Yeah.
But now I got to ask you about eating on an aircraft carrier because again, you seem very limited at what you could do. So the 6,000 people, everybody's got to figure out how to eat. So you have to have enough provisions. What is eating like? What do you eat on an aircraft carrier?
Yeah. Very good question. So most of the time it wasn't that bad. So breakfast was usually the best meal because for a couple of reasons. One, because you could get the standard breakfast that they offered. You could also ask for extra eggs. And so we would typically get like hard-boiled eggs and some fried eggs and some scoops of the pre-scrambled eggs. And then, whatever else they might have, maybe it's potatoes or, I don't even know, waffles, some other stuff, fruit and stuff. So breakfast was always, like, usually the best meal. And then it always depended on where we were in our cruise and how much food we had gone through.
Aha!
So you would eat decent for a while, but then there was one time where we didn't get our underway replenishment. We can talk about that. That's really cool. It's called an unrep. We didn't get it, I think, because we were still like operating in a too dangerous of a place, and it wasn't safe enough to bring the replenishment ship in to refuel us and give us new food. So as you start to eat through your regular food rations, you start to get down to the stuff that they save for emergencies.
It's tucked in the bowels of the ship somewhere.
And we got there one time.
Oh, no.
And we were literally eating this food that it said not for human consumption, for institution or military use only.
So to go back to your prison analogy, you're eating food that I wouldn't, as a regular non-Navy or a prisoner, will be allowed to eat.
Literally, the first words, not for human consumption.
Unless
you're in the military.
You're a polywag.
Unless you're a polywag or you're in prison. Yeah. And what that essentially was is if you remember Cocoa Puffs, the cereal?
Yeah.
Kind of like that. So just some unidentified meat, you know.
It's Cocoa Pebbles of meat.
Yeah, exactly.
Ooh.
So it's meat.
Yeah.
So we call them meat pellets. And it was essentially that and rice. And then if you're lucky, maybe like some canned peaches or something like that. And this is where like we started to like kind of like hoard and steal like Tabasco. So I remember like one time I found, I don't know who left it. Somebody messed up, but I got a bottle of Tabasco Chipotle, like the dark one.
Yeah.
And we used that, and that went right in my pocket, And so
it's like the most prized possession on the ship.
And so, we'd get down there, me and my buddies, you do everything usually with a group of guys, And so we'd go down there and we would eat. And, we'd get to our table and we'd look around, we'd pull that thing out and just slather it everywhere, go back in your pocket,
Nice.
But yeah, so we'd be eating like that, like prisoners or non-humans, I guess.
Great treatment we give you in the Navy. Thanks for signing up.
That's a pretty
Here's
popular.
your Cocoa Pebbles of meat.
That's a pretty popular term these days. Non-human.
Yep, exactly.
Non-human biologics. You know. All right. So we be eating that, and that is not fun. That sucks. That's big. That's no good.
And you're like, send me home. Get me off this shit.
So my dad, thankfully, and my mom and people, they would send out boxes sometimes, and they would be loaded with beef jerky and Snickers and granola bars and stuff like that. But we'd eat through that too.
Oh yeah.
You know, so before you know, that's all gone. And then we would have an unrep, an underway replenishment, which is a blast to participate in because they would send out replenishment ships and they would match our speed, get really close. Probably, if I had to guess, not far, 30 yards maybe.
Wow.
It's close, right? Because they have to attach hoses, and this is how we would get more jet fuel. So we would get more jet fuel. They would pump that over. I don't think they had to do water, but it's mostly fuel. And then they would send over these lines, and they would hoist over boxes of food. And so as it's coming over, yay, you know, lettuce, raspberries, chicken.
So you're watching this stuff come in like,
Yeah.
no more Cocoa Pebble meat.
All this, you know, yeah, exactly. So all this stuff is coming over, but then you would get some of, this is how we knew it. You get some boxes, not for human consumption. This is how, like, I saw it with my own eyes. This wasn't like a rumor on the ship.
Yeah.
Not for human consumption, for institution or military use only. And I was like, these are those Cocoa Pebbles. Shit.
Can I drop them off the side of the ship?
Yeah, like, yeah, exactly. But then, you know, you'd be getting good stuff. You know, you'd see the ice cream come over and this kind of stuff. And then so you'd be like, this is when you really wanted to have a friend in, you know, the galley, we called it, you know, where you eat, because it's like, you know, they all had places to hide the good stuff. And, you know, sometimes the chiefs, you know, would have like peanut butter ice cream and stuff. So check this out. So we'd be eating, you know, meat pellets and Tabasco sauce and rice for a while and just hating life.
Oh, yeah.
And then we'd have an unrep, and you'd wake up, and the next day there would be freaking lobster tail, chicken and waffles, eggs, peanut butter ice cream, just like over the top stuff, like fried chicken and everything.
Sorry we made you eat the meat pellets that are not really for humans.
Yeah, so
Here's
we're gonna
a
make up
lobster
for
tail.
it. Yeah, it's just a lobster tail. And I remember
opposite ends of the
yeah,
spectrum.
and I would say this like at the time, you know, like because you're grateful for it when you have it. You're like, thank God. You
Absolutely,
know?
sure.
But I was also like, maybe we could just get like decent ham sandwiches all the time.
Yeah, just
You know?
consistency would
Yeah,
be
just
good.
like some decent food all the time instead of like just, you know, fighting for Tabasco sauce to kill the meat flavor of these Cocoa Puff things, you know. But anyways, the food overall was not that bad. Especially when you had good, you know, deliveries from, you know, mom and dad that had protein powders and Snickers bars and all that stuff.
Those are probably like the greatest things ever. It probably tasted so good in the middle of the Persian Gulf.
Oh yeah, dude. And especially when, you know, when you're 20 years old, you're working out every single day. You're also, this is where like you could actually say you have a very active lifestyle, because for, you know, most of the day you're walking on an uneven moving surface, lifting heavy stuff, you know, drinking multiple, you know, gallons of water, not pissing because you're sweating so much.
Yeah.
And so and if you have a high metabolism like me, like you're constantly in search of food. Like you're nonstop smashing snacks and food and food and food all the time.
How does this, because it ties into what you do now. Earn It All Academy is the best fitness program I've ever experienced, and I've done a lot. I've been searching for the right workout, and I've stuck with things that I thought were very good. But what we do is just top notch. I like to look at it as the apple of fitness.
Right.
How does what you learned on that ship apply to what you do now at Earn It All?
Very good questions. So a lot of people are different. Well, everyone's different, right? So some guys, believe it or not, in that environment, like I had to eat all the time just to keep, you know, whatever muscle I had on, right? All the time. Because I was moving so much. I was burning, who knows how many, I don't know, 6,000 calories a day, probably, maybe more. I don't know, you know, especially from working out in the heat and everything and all that. But other guys, they still struggled with weight. They were still fat, you know, because probably because they were not working out and they were just choosing to freaking, you know, eat Snickers bars and play cards afterwards.
Sedentary style on a boat.
Yeah, exactly. Which is crazy. I'm like, this is the easiest place in the world to be in shape. You're on a moving freaking treadmill, you know what I mean? Like all the time, and there's nothing else to do. So like how you were fat on the aircraft carrier just blew my mind. Like everyone should have been in shape. But what carried over into what we do at Earn It All Academy is like everyone's different, right? So we don't just have like an app where we just give everyone a cookie cutter workout or a program. We do personal training.
Yeah.
So your needs for nutrition and workouts are different than mine, and they're different than Adam's and different from Stephanie's and all all these different people. And that is good for us, and having that experience in a aircraft carrier like that, to know that, hey, everyone wants to get, to their goals, but there's a different way to get everybody there. So that's one of the things that we do is it's true personal customer service and personal training.
See, it's funny what you pick up along the way is
It's
life,
wild.
whether it's your aircraft carrier time in Japan, wiring the F-14s, fixing the F-18s, combat missions.
Yeah.
You had an experience on the flight deck, which is, again, the second highest risk job in the military outside of combat.
Yeah.
Because someone can fall off the ship. So as we wrap up here, how close was it for you to being in danger?
I mean, it was always right there.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one time, this was after flight operations, me and this guy, Jason, we went up to go check something on a plane, right? Someone's like, hey, go see how this plane is configured, probably, something like that, right? And so it's parked on the back of the ship. Well, on the back of the ship, remember I was telling you that E-2 Hawkeye was coming in too low?
Yeah.
Well, the back of the ship has a much longer and steeper ramp on it. In case a plane does come in too low, you don't want that tail hook that is down to catch something hard, like the net or the back of the ship, because then it'll snap off and the plane's going to crash and it's bad and it can't land, right? So they have this long ramp on the back. Well, we were up there in the middle of the night on night shift, and it's dark as hell up there, right?
Mm.
You don't have lights on because you'll be seen.
And there's no street lights in the ocean.
There's no street lights. And even our flashlights had filters on them. They were low light, and it was and you had to be very careful. You don't want bright white light because it can be seen for miles, Yeah. And so we're walking to the back, and he's in front of me. We're walking under the plane wing now, going back. I think we were going to check the chaff and flare or something underneath to see maybe how it was configured back there. And we're walking, and he had his light down to the side, and he's walking in front of me, and I could see his helmet, and all of a sudden he just drops. Whoa. And he's like, and he puts put a sound like that. And I just reached forward, and I was able to just kind of blindly, luckily, grab the back of his float coat and grab him. So he's kicking like a fish, and he's freaking out. And so I pull him up because he was going down that ramp.
Wow. Well,
there is a net at the bottom of that ramp. And so some people think, whatever, he would have gone into the net. You don't want to fall in the net. It's a metal net. And it's metal steel tubing with I believe a metal net under, in it to catch stuff. And there's still a drop. So if you fall into that net, you're still getting jacked up. You're still going to hit something hard. You're probably going to drop a tool or something. Now you have to file a report, and it's going to be a safety report. You're going to look like a dumbass, all this, but you could get hurt, right?
Sure.
You don't want to fall down in that thing. So I was able to catch him and pull him back up. And the only reason I didn't win a safety award for that period of time was because right after that, a couple days after that, my good buddy Juice caught one of the guys that worked on the flight deck. One guy wasn't paying attention. He got blown, and he was by jet exhaust, and he was rolling, and he was caught him and saved him from really getting hurt and maybe going over and stuff like that. And that happened in the middle of the day in front of everybody. So that was Juice is the man. He gets the safety award this quarter. And I was just
come on,
damn it. And they straight up told me man, you had the safety award until that happened.
Yeah, you were the front runner.
Yeah. So moral of the story is there's always stuff happening. There's always close calls. Luckily, I didn't have anything crazy happen to me. Someone stole my boots one time, which the new boots I had to break in rubbed my heels raw, so that wasn't fun. So I had to wear sneakers for a week or two or something like that. But luckily, I had a good time there, and I didn't have anything too crazy happen. But it was a great experience. That while you're there, I remember singing. There's a Disturbed song. I forget what they say in it, but we would always say, I don't want to be on this boat anymore. So while you're there, it's one of those things you kind of hate part of it. It's because you're stuck, and you're fighting everybody, and you miss what's going on at home and all this kind of stuff. But then afterwards, now we're talking about it, I'm that was the coolest experience of my life.
Especially as such a young person that sets you up for life, right? And what you do now and the skills you learn, you're able to apply.
Oh, totally. There's still lessons learned and skills that I picked up from that still apply today to either entrepreneurship, to me personally, to our business, to our clients, to like all sorts of stuff. And I was able to pick that up at such a young age, and it's so cool how it's still relevant now.
Absolutely.
You know.
Thank you for sharing all of this, Justin. It's been awesome because it's such a unique experience, but you've also had another unique experience after you got off the boat and you transitioned to now the F-35. So I would love if you would come back and tell us how you got your name, Justin Cross, on the side of an F-35, because that's pretty badass in and of itself.
As a civilian who wasn't a pilot, too.
Even better.
Yeah.
And you worked on all kinds of classified things, which obviously you can't divulge, but we'll see how I can push you and what you can tell us next time around.
Deal.
Absolutely. Justin Cross, the CEO of the Earn It All Academy. EarnItAll.com, EarnAllAcademy.com. What's the phone number?
602-900-8703.
Say it again.
602-900-8703. Shoot us a text or a call. We will get you into the best shape of your life, and you will not hate yourself for doing it.
Beautiful, beautiful thing. Thank you, Justin.